Good afternoon and welcome back to Revealed. I'm Marquita Brooks, your host and teacher, and we are starting a new month. We're going into month 10, and the focus for this month is Before the Coming of the King. Again, that is the topic for the theme for the 10th month is Before the Coming of the King. Our God is a God of order. Before he breaks through into human time with his Messiah, he prepares the earth and his people for this momentous occasion. All things must be in place and in order before the king comes. This requires an uprooting of that which opposes the kingdom of God and the planting of that which must be in place for the kingdom. God's people must understand these moves of God and meet him where he's working to prepare for the coming of the king. And so as we go into week one under this 10th month topic, we want to see, or 10th month theme, the topic for week one is sustained faith in tribulation. So we'll be looking at some tribulation. This is the focus. As God's people prepare for our King, we must endure tribulation through sustained faith. Again, as God's people prepare for our King, we must endure tribulation through sustained faith. Challenging times must precede the coming of Messiah. And so we've got to be in a place of sustained faith in order to make it through these challenges, tribulations, and all of the shakings that happen in the earth so that we can actually come out, emerge in a place of faith, and be used by God to prepare for the coming of our King. And so we're going to start in this first day. And the topic of this first day is protection for God's people. See, these are things we've got to understand. Protection for God's people. Now, we're going to start in 1 Samuel chapter 18. We'll also be reading chapter 19. And this is looking at David, these times of David. Of course, we remember that we've just gotten out of chapter 17 of 1 Samuel where David defeats Goliath. Now he's coming into a place of prominence. And so Jonathan here in chapter 18 of 1 Samuel is on to David, and Jonathan is going to be Saul's oldest son, in which case Jonathan was next in line for the kingship because he's the oldest son of King Saul. But he's a good man with a good heart, and he's drawn by David's character so that he loves David as himself. So they have this amazing friendship, which is one of the best biblical examples of covenant friendship. They're not just acquaintances, but they enter into a covenant with one another to be friends. And so we see that in verse 3 that Jonathan makes a covenant with David, and he gives David his cloak and his armor and his belt and his bow. And basically he is building David up. He has decided to even put David before himself because he sees God at work in David and the character of the godly character that is in David. And of course, for Jonathan to identify it, he's also got that godly character. And they both become wonderful friends. David is successful everywhere he goes. King Saul, puts David in charge of his fighting men. And everything is pleased by everything that David does. Now, when they return back to the city in this procession, all these victories that they've had against these Philistines, the women come out singing, Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands. And so immediately Saul now becomes jealous. David has all this grace and favor with Saul until this song. So now Saul is seeing that the people are favoring David even over him. They see the victories that David is having, the godly character. God's favor is on David. Of course, Samuel had anointed David in chapter 16. And so there is this a wonderful power of the Spirit that's on David. The Spirit has left Saul. And so the people are drawn by the Spirit of God on David. And they start to sing about it. And this is infuriating Saul. It infuriates him. And so he starts to watch David. He starts to look at him suspiciously. He becomes jealous of him. And one of these days, when this evil spirit is upon Saul, he actually, tries to kill David while David is playing the harp for him. So now, while David is leading Saul's army, he's, in covenant friendship with Jonathan, Saul's oldest son. He's still ministering to Saul. He's still ministering the harp to Saul. He hasn't gotten to a place where he thinks, well, I'm leading the army. I shouldn't be playing this harp before the king. He's still very humble, and he is chosen to be a worshiper. So even if he weren't ministering to Saul, he would still be playing that harp or his lyre, which is like the small looking harp, like it's one that people can hold on their arm, which is often what you see David with is a lyre as opposed to a harp, which is bigger. Of course, the harp is like, 4 or 5 feet tall, but the lyre is one that you can hold in your arms, you can carry around. And so David is ministering, worshiping, and then Saul, this evil spirit comes upon Saul because he's jealous of David, and he tries to pin David to the wall. Of course, David eludes him, and then he realizes, while Saul's trying to kill me. But he keeps ministering, he keeps worshiping God, and so Saul comes up with a new plan to try to kill David because he can't pin him to the wall with his spear. He decides to make David his son-in-law. So he's going to try to use one of his daughters to put David in some type of vulnerable position so that Saul can kill him. And so he tries it with his oldest daughter, Mary, but David, is really humble, and he's like, oh no, I can't marry the king's daughter. I can't become the son-in-law. I don't have a reputation. I don't have any money. I can't be the king's son-in-law. But later on, his another one of David's Saul's daughters, Michal, she falls in love with David. And so Saul says, let's try this again. I'm going to try to get David to marry this daughter. She's in love with him. And now Saul is even more cunning. He tells his servants, listen, tell David that he should marry my daughter. And tell him that the only price I want, the only bride price or dowry that I want is the foreskins of 100 Philistines. Now, what he's saying is basically, I just want you to be victorious in battle. I want you to go kill some of my enemies, and that I will consider a bride price for my daughter. Because the whole point is that David has not built a fortune yet. Saul is the king. He's got the spoils of war from the victories he's already had. And David is like, I don't have anything like that. I can't become the king's son-in-law. But when he finds out that the bride price is killing some Philistines, he's like, oh, I can do that. And so he goes out and he actually kills 200 Philistines and brings the foreskins in a bag to Saul. Very disgusting. But the point is, it's the proof that these were not people of Israel, that he killed one of God's enemies, going to be an uncircumcised person, as David addressed Goliath as the uncircumcised Philistine. So this is proof that he's killed those Philistines. So now David has brought this bride price before Saul, even before it was time for him to get married. And then Saul gives Michal to David as his wife. And so he thinks, okay, now I'm going to be able to trap him. But the Lord continues to be with David. And this is freaking Saul out more and more and more because he is still in rebellion to God. Samuel has already told him that the Lord is ripping the kingdom of him, that he's giving the kingdom to somebody more deserving. And rather than Saul agreeing with the plan of God, in his rebellion, in his flesh, and in his fear, he's still trying to fight against his plan of God, which of course we know can't happen. And so because David is within the plan of God, we see God's protection continuing to cover him. And that's important for us to note as well, because in these times that we are in, we realize that there are believers who are dying. There's certain believers, like there's bishops and apostles and pastors and leaders that are dying from this coronavirus. And then we see other believers who are being protected. And the reality is, in these end times, before the coming of our King, what we've got to understand is that God is a God who protects, but he protects purpose. And when we've come to the place where, the leg of our journey is over, then he brings us home to be with him. David is just starting his journey. He has not fulfilled his purpose yet. So this is why you're going to see this hand of protection upon David, because when it's time for God to bring David home, he's going to bring David home as well. But at this point in time, the Lord is preparing David for the kingship, so he's not going to allow anything to touch him. You see the same thing with Yeshua. So Yeshua was miraculously protected until the day of his crucifixion. On that day, he actually surrenders himself to the will of God, turns himself over to his enemies, and of course he's crucified. And this is the thing we've got to understand about what's happening in the earth. Some people among God's children are being chosen to be taken back with him. And then others, he said, I've got something I still need you to do on the earth. And so we see a miraculous protection for those who the Lord still wants to do something in the earth, those who have not yet fulfilled all that he has called them to. And so this is what we see with David. David is full of purpose, and so the Lord's hand is upon him for protection. So going on to chapter 19, of 1 Samuel, you see Saul trying to kill David again. He's still trying to kill him. And so now we realize that Saul has now revealed his plan to Jonathan, his son, and to his servants that he wants to kill David. But everybody is saying, David has been good to you. Why are you trying to kill him? Why are you taking a stand against him? David is for the king, because David is not trying to, plot treason or anything like that. He's not trying to make himself king. Saul is afraid that that's what's happening, but it's not. David's waiting on the Lord. And he's a good servant to Saul. He does whatever Saul asks him to do. But Saul's fear, his jealousy, is not allowing him to really see the situation for what it is. And so he sees David as his enemy. And of course, we understand he's also being tormented by an evil spirit. So the enemy is speaking that into him. David is your enemy. You need to take him out, because the enemy wants to take David out. The enemy, realizes the same has anointed David. God's going to use David. So the enemy wants to take David out, because he's trying to use Saul in this time where he is, influenced by demonic evil spirits, where he's himself losing grip on his own kingdom. The enemy is monopolizing on that. He's trying to utilize that for his own goods or his own means to actually get David out of the picture to stop the plan of God. But the enemy's not able to do that. The Lord will not allow his plan to be stopped. And so we see that every time that Saul tries to kill David, or he tries to put David into, in the front line of a war with the Philistines, or whatever he tries to do, the Lord gives David victory. Like he is miraculously victorious. Like he is overwhelmingly victorious. And every time that happens, Saul freaks out. And so we see then that they watch David at his house with his wife, Michal, and they decide, okay, we're going to come upon the house of David and we're going to kill him in his sleep. And so the wife realizes it, because Saul is her father. She's heard these rumors. My father's trying to kill you, so you should leave. And they put, something in the bed that's called, a household idol. So there's idols somewhere in Saul's family, Saul's household. They put it in the bed, put some goat hair on it, so it looks like a person sleeping in the bed. And they leave him alone for a minute, and then they come upon him, and David's already gone. And so then, of course, Saul is angry with his daughter for allowing David to escape, because this is his enemy. And so she says, oh, David forced me to do it, as opposed to taking a stand against her father, she really should have been honest with her father, or she should have run with David herself. But she doesn't. And so it actually affects their marriage for the rest of their lives. The fact that she stays behind, pretends to her father that David forced her to provide this escape for him. So then we see later on, Saul actually gives her in marriage to somebody else while David is on the run from Saul. And so now she's literally got two husbands, because there was no divorce from David. And that breaks Torah. It puts her in a terrible position spiritually, because now she's got these soul ties with these two men, which was not supposed to happen. It is not the will of God for David that his wife has been given away to some other man. I mean, it's a terrible situation. And so she should have stood with her husband. She did protect him, but she either should have fled with him or taken a stand against her father. And she didn't do either. She was afraid of Saul, because Saul's, trying to kill everybody. He's murderous and he's crazy at this point. And so she's trying to, in her own fear and in her own reasoning, she's trying to protect herself from her father's murderous accusations, when she should have depended on the Lord to protect her, because it actually affects her destiny forever. So now David flees and he goes to Samuel at Ramah. This is where Samuel lived, and we read that already. And so now Samuel has among him, this guild of prophets. So he's got prophets that are living there with him. There's a company of prophets and a dormitory of prophets where they're all living together and prophesying together. And Samuel's training them. He's raising them up. This is where David flees to. And so there is a heavy presence of God there. There's a spirit of prophecy that is on this place, which is amazing. So then Saul sends messengers to come and get David. But when the prophets are prophesying and Samuel's there, the spirit of God falls on Saul's messengers and they start to prophesy. So then Saul sends more messengers to try to retrieve David from this prophet's dormitory, this company of prophets. And then those messengers receive a spirit of prophecy and they start to worship and prophesy. So then Saul says, okay, you know what? I need to go and get David myself. And so Saul actually leaves himself to go to this place to try to retrieve David at the prophet's dormitory. And the spirit of prophecy falls on Saul. So much so that he prophesies like for this long period of time, and people go, is Saul now a prophet? But of course he's not. The Lord is using the spirit of prophecy to protect David. And so then David flees from the prophet's dormitory because he realized, okay, Saul's going to keep trying to kill me here. And so he flees from this place. He's on the run from Saul. But the Lord uses whatever he wants to continue to miraculously protect David. So now we're going to go to some of David's Psalms. We'll be doing that throughout the week so that we can read Psalms that he wrote during this season, or Psalms that actually apply to things that are happening to him in this season. And so this one is Psalm 59. We're going to start at Psalm 59, which I have titled, As They Watch for Me, I Will Watch for You. That's what I titled it. And it says at the beginning, for the leader, set to do not destroy by David. In Miktam, which is a musical term, when Shaul or Saul sent men to keep watch on David's house in order to kill him. So he wrote this while he was at home, and the guys are outside watching to come into his house and kill him, which is what we just read. And it reads as follows. My God, rescue me from my enemies. Lift me up out of the reach of my foes. Rescue me from evildoers. Save me from bloodthirsty men. For they are there lying in wait to kill me. Openly they gather themselves against me, and not because I committed a crime or sinned, Adonai. For no fault of mine, they run and prepare, awaken to help and see me. And so then he talks about God being a punisher of the nations and of all wicked evildoers, and talks about people returning at nightfall to try to get him, and lies are coming out of their lips. But he's saying, Lord, don't listen to them. And instead, Lord, you mock them, you laugh at them, and you thwart all their plans. Be my strength, my fortress, my place of refuge. Give me grace. Come and rescue me. Don't allow them to kill me. Don't allow them to overpower me. But instead, Lord, you bring them down as you are my shield. And as he keeps worshiping God, and because he sees these men showing up, he's looking out the window of his house. He sees them lying in wait for him in the darkness. He is writing this song. He's writing Psalm 59. And this becomes so important because in most of us, when we're going through troubles, we're not thinking to worship God. We're focusing on the fear. In writing these Psalms, David takes his focus off of the circumstances, the tribulation that he's going through, and he focuses on the Lord. And in worship, he's confessing where he is. He confesses what's going on in his soul. He's confessing his fear. He's recounting the situation, but his focus is on God. And this is really how we're going to operate and sustain faith in the midst of tribulation. That's the only way we can do it, is if we take our focus off of the circumstances and things that are making us fearful. We take our focus off of the tribulation, the persecution themselves, and we focus on the Lord. This is what David has done in all of his Psalms. And so I'm going to take you also to Psalm 41. And of course, this week we'll be reading Psalms of David. And so we have another Psalm of David, Psalm 41, where David talks about how blessed are those who care for the poor. When calamity comes, Adonai will save them. And so he's talking about himself, and that he has been a blessing to the poor. He's helped people. He's blessed people. And now the Lord has come to save him. And so he says in verse 5 in the complete Jewish, and verse 4 in other versions, I said, Adonai, have pity on me. Heal me, for I've sinned against you. My enemy said the worst about me. When will he die and his name disappear? Because his wife had told them he was sick. Oh, he's in bed. He's sick. And so they're like, okay, well, maybe we'll have to kill him. Maybe he'll just die. But he is instead, he is calling out to God. He's crying out to God. And they're hoping that a fatal disease has attached itself to him, and it's going to take him out. So maybe they won't have to kill him, and they can just go back to Saul and tell him that he's died. But of course, David wasn't actually sick. He's actually just avoiding Saul. Then he even talks about the closeness of a friend betraying him. Of course, he and Saul were very close. And all of the men in Saul's army, he had led them. So the guys waiting outside of his house to kill him for Saul are friends of his. They're personally known to him. They have fought battles together. They've had each other's back. David has saved their lives, and they've probably saved David's life. And now they're waiting outside of his home to kill him. And so we see him talking about, the closeness of a friend whom he relied on, who shared a table with him, turning against him. And that's not just going to be Saul, but all of the men in the army. But then he blesses the Lord, which is so beautiful in the last verses. Blessed be Adonai, the God of Israel, from eternity past to eternity future. Amen and amen. And so again, that worship goes back to God, and he does not keep maintain his focus only on his circumstances. Now let's go to Revelation chapter 7. We're going to read verses 1 through 8. Now you will remember that Yeshua, the Lamb, the only one worthy to break the seals off of this scroll, has been given this scroll. And so what we see is the Lamb has opened the first seal. We see him opening the second seal. He opened the third seal, the fourth seal, the fifth seal. The sixth seal has been broken off of this scroll. Now that happened in chapter 6. Now we are here in chapter 7, where we're still under this sixth seal having been broken off of this scroll. Okay. Now after this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the land, on the sea, or on any tree. Now that is again divine protection. God is protecting everything on the earth from these winds that are going to cause all types of problems and upheavals and uprooting, because he wants to seal his people. It says in verse 3, do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And this is, of course, the sealing of the 144,000. 12,000 from each of the tribes of Israel. Now, this is important that you pay attention to this, because I remember when I first read it, I was like, that's not right. And of course, it is right. Of course, it's perfectly right, but the Lord is revealing something here. So we see the sons of Jacob, or the sons of Israel, because each one of those sons makes a tribe. So we got Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali. Now, we also have Manasseh. Manasseh is a son of Joseph. Okay. But Jacob, when he first met Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, he crossed his hands and he prayed over them, saying that the younger Ephraim would be master over the older, which was Manasseh. So he takes those 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim of Joseph, to be his own sons. So we see Manasseh being listed here like he's a son of Jacob, though he's actually a son of Jacob's son, Joseph. So Manasseh's listed, Simeon, or Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun. Joseph is mentioned, which means, because Manasseh's already been mentioned, when Joseph is spoken of here, speaking specifically of Ephraim, because Ephraim, remember I told you, Jacob crossed his hands and he gave the right hand blessing, which is the blessing for the older son, to Ephraim, which means Ephraim would take on the double portion blessing of Joseph. So Ephraim receives the blessing that was bestowed upon Joseph. Ephraim, it receives really the title that would be given to the firstborn of Joseph, though he was actually the secondborn. So when it speaks of Joseph here in verse 8, it's speaking of Ephraim. And we know, or you'll see it as we go through all these different scriptures, that Ephraim was a leader in the northern kingdom. Ephraim was a leader of Israel until then Judah steps up, and then Judah becomes a leader, and then the kingdom split, and Judah leads the south, and Ephraim leads the north. And so there is the blessing of Joseph that's on Ephraim. So when you see Joseph here, that's Ephraim, because Manasseh's already been mentioned. Then we see Benjamin, and that's all 12. Now, here's the challenge. We see it. I remember when I looked at this, I was like, okay, I see Joseph and I see Manasseh. When Joseph is one son, so again, that's Ephraim and Manasseh. And I see Levi, because oftentimes the Levites were excluded when we're looking at the 12 tribes. So if you broke up Ephraim and Manasseh, Levi is taken out, because Levi was a priest to everybody. But here we see that among the numbering, the Levites are here. The Levites are mentioned. So if you break up Joseph, and you got Joseph, which represents Ephraim, and you got Manasseh, and you've broken up Joseph into 2 tribes, and we still got 12 tribes here, and Levi's included, that means somebody's missing. And I remember going, wait a minute, somebody is missing from here. And I went back to the sons, and of course, I've shared this in many teachings, the son that's missing is Dan. Dan is not in this listing, which means the descendants of Dan, the Danites, that continued on, in the line of the lineage of Dan, they are not sealed among the 144,000 with a mark, so that the winds and the tribulations and the things that are to come don't touch them. They're not sealed. They're not even counted among Israel anymore. And I've done an entire teaching. You want to go back and watch this. It was a God Speaks called The Judgment of Dan, where I talk about why Dan is not in this number. Because I spent some time talking to the Lord about it, because he does not make mistakes. He didn't forget about Dan. He didn't go, oh man, there's another son that I forgot about. No, Dan is deliberately not included in this numbering. Now, we just were reading in the book of Judges what the Danites did. Remember, they didn't take their inheritance. Everybody else took the inheritance that God gave them. The Danites allowed the Canaanites to run them out of their inheritance. So they went all the way to the far north. And then they took over this little unsuspecting town that was not on God's list for destruction, destroyed them all, took over their town, brought the Levite, the ephod, the silver idol, and all this idolatry into this new town that they called Dan, which was not in their inheritance. When Jeroboam sets up golden calves, Dan is one of the places where he sets up the golden calf. And now, because they are the northernmost tribe, which is not what they're supposed to be, because they're supposed to be deeper into Israel, because they've gone all the way far north beyond the borders of that which God said was the promised land. When the northern kingdom goes into exile, Dan, being the northernmost kingdom, is the first one to go into exile in Assyria. Now, this is very important that you get this, because we see that it's like the covenant with Dan has been broken. Dan has broken the covenant with Yahweh by not taking their inheritance, by being idolatrous, by destroying people that were not on God's list for destruction, by hosting Jeroboam's golden calf. They break the covenant with Yahweh, so that when he numbers his people, the 144,000, they are not in the numbering. I mean, this is very important that we get that, because we just looked at Samson being a Nazarite, him breaking the covenant and the results of that. And so it becomes so important that we get that we can get into a position where we have so offended Yahweh, even though we are his people, that the covenant is broken and we are no longer numbered among his people. And this is what happens with the Danites. They do not make it here into Revelation chapter 7. They are not numbered among God's people. And that is a big deal. This is a very, very big deal. We want to really have our eyes open concerning this, and not just for the descendants of Dan, because the children of Israel have spread all throughout the world. So the Danites are mixed among all types of people at this point. But for all of us to realize that we can go so far away from God that we are no longer counted as his people. That can happen. It is possible. And so we want to be careful and allow the Lord to minister his truth to us, so that we might be blessed to be among those that receive the divine protection. And divine protection can come in many forms. It can come in the form of him actually sealing us, like he did with these tribes that are listed here, 12,000 from each of these tribes. We can see the protection come the way he protected David. He kind of seals David, and it doesn't matter what Saul tries to do or anybody tries to do, David is spared and he's blessed. But we can see the protection can also come in God just taking us home. He can come and just say, I want you to be with me. I don't want you to go through this time, because there are many who this is what he chooses to do. Rather than allowing them to continue through these tribulations and the challenges that we're going through, he just takes them home to be with him. And most of us don't see that as a protection, but the Lord doesn't see this life the way we see it. This is the first leg of our journey. At some point, all of us are going to be in eternity with him, and he chooses when that happens. And so God will protect his people. What's important for us is to make sure that we're a part of his people, that we're actually counted in the number of his people. Very important. So now let's go to the next day. The second topic we're looking at is the oneness of the covenant. So remember, we talked about when we continue to be his people. Now we got to look at the oneness of the covenant. We're going to go back to 1 Samuel. We're going to only read chapter 20 on this day. And this is about David and Jonathan. So now when David leaves the prophets' dormitory, this company of prophets where Saul is just prophesied all out of his clothes and everything all day and night, he decides, I'm not going to keep bringing this upon these people, because if I'm here, Saul's going to keep trying to find me here. He goes back to Jonathan, because he knows Saul is at the prophet's dormitory prophesying naked. And so he's like, okay, while he's occupied by the Holy Spirit, let me go talk to Jonathan, my brother in the spirit, this covenant friend that I have, to find out what is going on. And so he's like, listen, what did I do wrong? Why is your dad trying to kill me? Like, he is serious. No matter where I go, he is really hunting me down. And Jonathan's like, you didn't do anything wrong. Heaven forbid that this should happen to you. He's like, look, there's nothing but a step between me and death, because he is hunting me down like a dog. And so Jonathan says, listen, I'm going to find out if this is really what's in my father's heart. Rosh Hashanah is coming, and we're going to have a dinner for Rosh Hashanah. And by the way, those of you who are watching this in real time, Rosh Hashanah is tonight. We're going into the second biblical month, the month of Ayar. It starts tonight at sundown. So just be reminded of that if God has called you to do the priestly offerings for Rosh Hashanah tonight at sundown, it's the time to do it. We, of course, will be offering those 12 burnt offerings, 7 burnt offerings before the Lord, the 2 sin offerings, the ram offering for leaders, and the 2 bull offerings for our region and for our nation. All of this you can find in the workbook and in the training video that's at burntoffering.org. Again, you can download it at burntoffering.org. And so we see Jonathan and David observing Rosh Hashanah, even Saul observing Rosh Hashanah. So he's like, look, Rosh Hashanah is tomorrow. So we're going to be dining with the king. So Saul will be back because they had a wonderful celebratory dinner for Rosh Hashanah. And so, of course, the priests are offering these sacrifices on Rosh Hashanah that are required, which is what we do in the evening, what we'll do in the evening tonight. Spiritual sacrifice. They offered natural sacrifices. After the sacrifices were offered, then the people ate the meat of the sacrifice. Some of it was to be burned up before the Lord, and some of it the people actually had to eat. And so this is the dinner of the king. These Rosh Hashanah sacrifices, now the king is having a banquet where we're going to eat the sacrifices that have been offered up to Yahweh. It's like a renewal of the covenant as we go into a new biblical month. Very important that we see what this happening, because this is all about alignment with the kingdom of God. And we see the kingship working with the priesthood. As the priests are offering sacrifices to Yahweh, the king and his court are eating from those sacrifices to kind of renew the covenant of God. And so, of course, Jonathan is going to be there. David, who is the commander of Saul's army, is supposed to be there. So now Saul and prophesied before the Lord. He's kind of coming back to himself. But again, remember, the Holy Spirit in totality has left him. So he got a moment of some spirit. But when he comes back home, the evil spirit is going to come back upon him. And so he's planning. They got this plan. So Jonathan's like, look, if my father asks for you, I'm going to tell him that, something happened. You're not ceremonially clean, so you can't come to Rosh Hashanah dinner. If he's fine, then we know he's not going to try to kill. He's not going to try to kill David. Because actually, it's David's plan. David says, if he's fine, we know he's not trying to kill me. But if he's mad, if he gets angry because I'm not there, then we know he's trying to kill me, because he was going to use Rosh Hashanah as another opportunity to try to kill me. And so Jonathan goes along with the plan. He says, absolutely, let's do it. So David's hiding in the field. Well, Jonathan goes to Rosh Hashanah with his father. And on the first night, because they do this actually 2 nights, the first night, Jonathan says, no, Saul assumes that David is unclean. The second night, Jonathan says, David said to please forgive him. He went to have a dinner with his father's family for Rosh Hashanah. And Saul goes, you're lying, you're working with David, and he tries to kill Jonathan, his own son. He throws a spear at him like he just done earlier with David, and he misses him. And then he calls him a crooked rebel and the son of a whore. Like, he talks about his mom. Like, it's terrible. And Jonathan is enraged. He's like, I cannot believe you acting like this, because he didn't want to believe that his father really had desired to murder David in cold blood. But he sees it here. So he's like, clearly you're trying to kill David, but you was just trying to kill me. And so he goes back out to David and he lets him know, yes, my father does want to kill you. And they cry and they kiss each other and just hold each other. And it's just like, man, this is terrible, because now David is literally his brother-in-law, because he's married to his sister. And they're a family at this point. And he's like, man, so you're going to be on the run. You're going to be homeless. You're supposed to be leading the army. And they're just weeping and crying. They're best friends. And it's just a terrible situation. And Jonathan is dismayed because his father has just dishonored him in front of all these people and dishonored himself. Like, he just acted the fool at the Rosh Hashanah banquet. And so it's just, Jonathan is just taken aback of being a godly man who knows the ways of God. He's like, this is not right. This is not right. And they're both just distraught. And so what we see here is that even though Jonathan was the son of Saul, because he was in covenant with God, he's in covenant with David, who is God's chosen leader. Same thing with David, because he's in covenant with God. He's in the friendship covenant with Jonathan. He comes to his friend. He risks his life to come to Saul's house to see his friend, so that they would always be in covenant with each other. And so this is their last interaction, and they remain in covenant until even after Jonathan's death. David continues to honor this covenant that he has with his friend, which is so important, because it's a beautiful example for us of what friendship is really supposed to look like. Now I want to go to Psalm 5, another Psalm of David. And we see in this Psalm, which I've titled, Hear Me, O God, where David is actually crying out to God. And so, of course, we know this is the experience that, he's having, even in this time when he's now running from Saul. He's having to leave everything he loves, everyone he loves, because Saul is trying to kill him and is using the whole army, who were his, friends and comrades. He's using all of them to hunt David down. And so we see in verse 4 in the Complete Jewish and in verse 3 in other versions, it says, Adonai, in the morning, you will hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my knees before you and wait expectantly. And this is so beautiful because David is renewing this covenant with God every morning. He's on the run from Saul. He's really had to leave behind everything he has, everything he knows. He has no money. He has no nothing with him. He just jumped out the window because they were trying to kill him. And so he is poor and needy, and he's crying out to God, but he's saying, every morning, I'm coming before you. So every morning he's renewing that covenant with the Lord. And he's saying, you hate wicked men, but you will allow me to enter your house. I can come before your presence and with reverence for you because you're leading me in righteousness. And you will also deliver me from those who are lying in wait for me. And you will make my way straight, which is verse 9 in the Complete Jewish, or verse 8 in other versions. He even starts to really speak these affirmations that those who love the Lord should rejoice in him, to take refuge in him, and they should shout for joy forever. So he's even encouraging us, like as we are reading this, that we would stand in our own faith during our times of tribulation, just as David himself is standing in faith. Now I want you to go to Psalm 13, another Psalm of David, which I've titled, I rejoice in my time of need. And in this one, David is crying out to God, how long will you forget me and hide your face from me? Because he's still on the run. He stays on the run for years. He is on the run from Saul for years. And so he says, look and answer me, Adonai, give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. And so remember, he had told Jonathan, there's only a step from me in death. So he's like, I really think I'm going to die. This guy catches me, I'm going to die. And so I really need you. He's really crying out to God. He says, and don't allow me to die, because then my adversaries will say that they were able to beat me and they would rejoice in my downfall, which of course does not give glory to God. And so he says, but in your grace, my heart rejoices as you bring me to safety. I will sing to Adonai because he gives me even more than I need. And so you see him starting feeling forsaken and forgotten, and he ends with, I will sing to you because you'll give me even more than I need. And this is so important for us in these times that we're in. Social distancing, people's incomes are being affected, all types of stuff is happening. That we would give God our honest feelings as we renew this covenant with him, but we would end in praise, as we see David doing. Now we want to go to Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 12, as we continue that chapter, and do another portion of that chapter. And here, after the 144,000 of the tribes of Israel are numbered, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes that we just mentioned, we see here that a great multitude, now these are going to come from among all the nations. Those 144,000 were just those that came from Israel. This great multitude that is beyond counting is coming from every tribe, nation, people, and language and tongue. Like all of the people have this remnant among them that have come through this great tribulation, because this is what we see happening here, that they are dressed in white, holding palm branches, and they are singing victory to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And then when they worship, then the angels worship, and the four living creatures worship. Everybody's worshiping because everybody's in covenant with God. The multitude is in covenant with God. The angels are in covenant with God. The four living creatures are in covenant with God. So when one worships, the Spirit falls. This one worships, that one worships, that one worships. And so they actually are in covenant with each other. And this is what's so important about being in the kingdom of God. When we are in covenant with God, he actually brings us into a oneness with the rest of his people. And they're from all different nations and tribes and backgrounds and people groups, but they're all in covenant with him, so they're all in covenant with each other, which is such a beautiful, beautiful sight to see. Now let's go to the third day. Persecution of the righteous. We got to understand that persecution is coming. Even though we want to operate in sustained faith, persecution is absolutely coming. So we're going to go back to 1 Samuel, looking at chapters 21 and 22. Here in 21, chapter 21, this is what happens. After David leaves Jonathan, so he's left Saul's household, okay? He goes to Ahimelech. Now, Ahimelech is the priest at Nob. This is one of the priestly towns. Okay, so he's from the tribe of Levi. He's a Cohen. He's a priest. He's leading the priest in this city called Nob. Now, what is important for you to note is that he's from the lineage of Eli. Now, you're not going to see it here. It's not going to say that Ahimelech is from the lineage of Eli, but you'll remember from earlier on in this book, in 1 Samuel, that God actually pronounced the curse over the household of Eli, because Eli's two sons were wicked. Hophni and Phinehas, they died on the same day. The Ark of the Covenant is taken captive, and then God curses the sons of Eli, the descendants of Eli, saying that they will no longer stand in his presence as priests. Now, what happens initially is that Hophni and Phinehas die. However, of the lineage of Eli, they keep ministering. Ahimelech, and I'll show you guys when we get there, is actually from the lineage of Eli. You don't see it here, but you're going to see it later. And it's going to become important when we look at chapter 22. So now let's look at this. Ahimelech, who is a priest before Yahweh, sees David. David shows up and he tells him, listen, I'm on a mission and I need some help. I need a sword and I need some food. Ahimelech tells him, the only sword I have is the sword of Goliath, the one you struck down. And so he's like, there's no sword like it. Please give that one to me. And this is clearly Yahweh. This is God, because it's actually the sword that David kind of won in battle. I don't even know how it got here to Nob, and David didn't have it, because it said that he took Goliath's stuff and put it in his tent. But at some point, the sword of Goliath gets away from David, and he winds up with these priests. Now here, God is restoring it back to him. And this is such a beautiful encouragement for David, because he's on the run from Saul. Getting Goliath's sword is like a reminder, I brought you through before, I will bring you through again. And it's so beautiful, because God will do little things like that for us too, just little reminders of how he will bless us. Like he orchestrated this whole thing so that the sword of Goliath shows up in this town of priests. Well, like I said, it was at some point among David's stuff. Now it's here in the town of priests that he escapes to, and this priest gives him this sword. And so he actually fights with this sword of Goliath, continuing on in the times, because he gets this sword restored back to him, which is a constant reminder of that very first victory that he had, which has propelled him into greatness in Israel. The priest also gives him consecrated bread, which means this is the bread of the presence. Remember, in the tabernacle, there was the bread of the presence, the table of the presence, where 12 loaves were set out before the Lord daily. They were baked by the priest. They were set out, and then the priests were supposed to eat those loaves and then put fresh bread out before Yahweh. This is the bread they had, meaning only priests are supposed to eat it. So the priest tells David, listen, that's all the food I have is this consecrated bread. But if you kept yourself pure, like if you're fasting and you're seeking Yahweh, you kept yourself away from women, then I can give you this bread. And David's like, oh, definitely, I've kept myself pure. Because remember, he's on the run. He hasn't seen his wife or anybody in a long time. He's like, definitely. He's kind of on a involuntary fast. He's fasting from everything because he's on the run. He has nothing with him. And so he's like, oh, yeah, definitely I've kept myself pure. I'm clean. You can give me that bread. And so this is what David eats. He eats the bread of the priest, the bread of the presence, which again is the Lord sustaining him. He is homeless. He is penniless. He has no food, no refuge, because anybody goes to is possibly going to turn him over to Saul. And so he goes to this place of refuge, this town of priests, which is supposed to be a place of refuge for someone who is innocent. He gets the sword of Goliath, which is an encouragement for him. He gets the bread of the presence, the bread these priests are setting out before the Lord that's consecrated unto Yahweh, so that you guys know when you go to temple service with us, we set that bread out and then we eat that bread, the presence, like it's not like eating regular bread. It has now been blessed. It has been consecrated. It's like saturated with the presence of Yahweh. And so this is the bread he eats, and it sustains him. Like it's such a beautiful revelation we see here that the Lord does when he gives him the sword of Goliath in this bread of the presence. Ahimelech is absolutely being used by God to bless David and continue David on his journey at this point. God is absolutely at work in this whole situation. However, we see in verse 7 that Doeg the Edomite sees David there. And Doeg the Edomite, is Saul's chief shepherd. So he has a loyalty to Saul. Very important that we get that. So David flees and he goes to Achish, the king of Gath. Now, Gath is one of the Philistine towns. Remember, there were 5 Philistine towns. Remember when they sent the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel, they sent the 5 golden rats and the 5 gold tumors, because the 5 towns had all been attacked by rats, and the people in 5 towns all had these tumors. Well, Gath was one of the towns, and the king of the Philistines is actually living in Gath, or in other versions it's Gath, but it's Gath. And David flees there, thinking that he'll find refuge from Saul. But the king's soldiers recognize him and go, "That's David," who they said, Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his tens of thousands. David gets afraid that because he's by himself. It's just David at this point. And he is told Ahimelech, I'm on a mission and I got some men, and but it's just David. It's just David. Because he does not want the priest to really, he's not trying to defame Saul. He's not like, okay, the king has gone crazy and he's trying to kill me and he just tried to kill his son. He's not doing all that. So he's like, I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission, tries to make it simple. And then the priest's like, well, why are you by yourself on a mission? Like, well, I got some men, they're just not here right now. Which is kind of the truth. He does have men that are here with him right now. They're actually with Saul. But he doesn't really want to involve the priest in this mess, because it's a mess. It's a dishonorable mess is what it is. And he doesn't want to speak ill against Saul, and there's no way to explain what he's doing without talking about the king, so he doesn't. So when he gets here to Gath of the Philistines, he's by himself. It's just David on the run with Goliath's sword and some bread. And these guys recognize him. They tell the king, and they're like, look, we should kill this guy. And David starts to hear them, and he knows what's happening. And so he pretends to be insane. He does not identify himself. He starts to go crazy and allows, drool to come down his beard. And the king goes, okay, we got enough crazy people in Philistia. Y'all got to bring me crazy people from Israel. Get him out of here. And so then they send him on his way, and he doesn't get killed in Philistine territory this time. And this is what he devises to kind of escape from this persecution, because they realize that he is, a son of Israel. He's a child of Israel. He is, of course, fighting the Lord's battles. He's the one that killed Goliath, their champion. And so they, the soldiers they're not feeling David right now. And David at this time writes Psalm 56. And we're not going to read Psalm 56 because we already read it. But I want to point out to you, if you read at the beginning of Psalm 56, it says when he is in Gath. And he's fleeing from these soldiers in Gath. This is the time right now, because he's going to come back to Gath and he's not going to flee at that time. But this time is when he's fleeing. So this is when he writes Psalm 56, when he escapes from these soldiers who really kind of wanted to kill him and were going to try to turn the kingdom against him. Now we're going to chapter 22. And in chapter 22, what we see is that David goes to the cave in Adullam. Very important move that happens. Is some important things that happen in David's life. When he goes to the cave in Adullam, his brothers, his father's family, and others find out that he is there. Verse 2 says, all the people who were distressed and discontented and indebted, they gather themselves around him, and he becomes their leader. So now he starts to develop his own following apart from Saul's army, which is very important, because the army is loyal to Saul. Even those who have been his comrades, who have fought alongside him, are loyal to Saul, because they're not trying to get the rest of the army to turn on them. And they see what Saul is doing to David. They don't want to be like David. And so he can't find allies among them. Now here in this area of Judah, in the desert of Judah, he is actually finding allies among his family members and among other men, in the area that he is from. And they are all in a bad shape too. And this is why they make him their leader, because they think, at least you're in a better position than us. You're courageous. You got the favor of God upon you. He's like, look, I'm homeless. I don't have nothing. I had to leave my wife, everything I own. I don't have anything. And they're like, listen, God is with you. You can lead us. We're going to follow you. And so this is where he starts to develop his mighty men. But these guys are in debt, distressed, and discontented initially. They're not mighty at all. They're in a place in life where they do not feel the favor of God, but the Lord allows them to come together and actually support David. So then we continue going forward, and Gad shows up. This is the first time we see the prophet Gad. He will continue to be a seer and a prophet for David to continue on throughout David's reign as king. And so it's important that we see this introduction of this prophet at this point, because now we recently see there's a prophet connected to David, and all the kings always had a prophet that were connected to them. David has actually more than one. We're going to see Nathan later on, but this is where Gad shows up, enters into the scene with David. And he tells David, don't stay in the stronghold, leave, and you got to go deeper into Judah. You got to go into Judah. So this is what David does. He leaves and he goes into the forest of Hereth because Gad, the prophet, tells him, don't stay in the cave of Adullam, go down deep into Judah. So now Saul, of course, he is from Doeg the Edomite. David was at Nob with Ahimelech. And Saul gets angry. He's like, I can't believe none of you guys told me that David was here. I can't believe it. Y'all didn't even say anything to me because, of course, Benjamin and Judah are right there together. Those two territories are right there together. The Judah then is the land of Benjamin. And so Saul lives in Benjamin because he's from Benjamin, tribe of Benjamin. And so David was fleeing Saul's house in Benjamin, going up to Judah. And this is where he sees the priest in Nob, that's in Benjamin. And now he's crossing over from Benjamin into Judah, which is where he goes to the cave of Adullam, which is right there near Judah. And then he goes into, specifically into Judah after Gad tells him to do so. Now Saul is in Benjamin. He's talking to his own countrymen, the people of his own tribe. He's like, why didn't any of y'all tell me that you saw David here in the area of Benjamin? Because remember, he's on foot. And so, of course, he was still in Benjamin as he's fleeing from Saul, and leaving this conversation that he had with Jonathan. But then Doeg the Edomite is like, I saw him with Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech prayed for him, and he gave him Goliath's sword, and he gave him some food, and Saul is furious. So he goes to Nob, and he accuses the priest of treason. And they're like, what are you talking about? David is the leader of your army. We don't even know what you mean. We figured if he's here, he's been sent by you. He said he was on a mission. The priests have no idea what Saul is talking about, that he is accusing David of treason. Because in this time, things have, messages and information travels by word of mouth. There's no social media, there's no news broadcast, there's no billboards where he could have put up wanted David for treason. So the only people that know that Saul is trying to kill David are the people that are right around him. The priests don't understand what's happening. And David did not enlighten the priests because he didn't want to bring them into this mess, because it's a big fat mess. It's a blot on Saul's kingship because he's going crazy and becoming murderous, and David didn't want to soil his reputation this way. So David doesn't mention it. So the priests are like, what are you talking about, King? There is no one among your servants more trustworthy than David. He's your son-in-law. Like, what do you mean he's your enemy? The priests are at wit's end. And so then Saul says, all right, these priests have committed treason. We need to kill all of them. And his army is like, we're not about to kill the priests of the Lord. We're not doing that. You're not going to get us in trouble with God. And so his whole army backs up. But this one guy, Doeg the Edomite, because he's from Edom, which is the land of Esau, he is not a God-fearer. He's not an Israelite. He says, I'll kill the priest. And this one dude goes throughout this entire town and slaughters this town full of priests, killing all of them except one guy, Abiathar escapes. And he is the son of Ahimelech. And Ahimelech was the lead priest at this town. So when his son Abiathar escapes, he takes with him the ephod that his father wore and used in order to, discern the will of God, because the ephods had the Urim and the Thummim in them. And so he takes that with him, he leaves, and he goes to David, which is so important because he's like, okay, Saul just had my whole family killed. And David is like, he's looking for me. Your father was good to me. So the same man that's trying to kill you is trying to kill me. This is why he's after you. I'm so sorry. Stay with me and I'll keep you safe. Because now David has these men. Even though they're indebted and distressed and discontented, he's got some men that he can train. He got something he can work with. And so he's like, look, stay with us. If he comes for you, he's coming for all of us. You'll be safe. And so now he's got a prophet that's prophesying to him, and he's got a priest. But remember, these priests are from the line of Eli. And the Lord had already cursed the line of Eli, saying that they would not remain as priests, but they were still being priests. They were still operating as priests. And so even though the Lord had not said that they had to all die, he allows this horrible massacre because it actually removes the line of Eli from the priesthood. no longer are any more sons born from this line to continue to minister as priests, except the only one left is Abiathar. And you're going to see later what happens there to continue to fulfill that prophecy that the Lord gave, saying the sons of Eli were going to be cut off. So now, let's go to Psalm 52, where we continue to look at the topic persecution of the righteous. We see terrible things happening to righteous people. And I do want to point out that Ahimelech was of the line of Eli, but he was not doing the things that Eli's sons were doing. So he is included among the righteous being persecuted, Ahimelech and his whole family in the city of Nob, because they didn't participate in what Eli's sons had done. They were cursed because of what Eli's sons had done. They didn't participate in. And so we see, this curse taking effect, but the enemy just going all the way with it and destroying this whole town for the priest when the Lord was just removing them from the priesthood. And so here we see Psalm 52. Again, it's a Psalm of David. And it says specifically, when Doeg from Edom came and told Shaul, David has arrived at the house of Ahimelech. This is when David wrote this psalm. And it's important that you read it because you want to. I love the fact that David is writing psalms during his journey. So not only do we have the chronicler's account of what happened, most of this in 1 Samuel was written by Samuel. But he's actually going to die in the book of 1 Samuel. So we know that when the prophet's dormitory continues to write 1 Samuel and continues to write 2 Samuel, which of course at one point were one book. So one of the prophets that Samuel trains continues the book and writes it just like Samuel did, chronicling what's happening with David and Saul and stuff like that, and capturing the stuff that's happening. But they're chronicling it from this third person point of view. They're looking at the events taking place and writing down the events. When David writes the Psalms as these events are taking place, we get a glimpse into David's heart, what he's thinking, and which is so important to me, how he approaches God for worship while he's going through all these challenges, even the victories. We get to see how David worships God in the midst of what's going on in his life, which blesses me so much because there's no other person in the Bible that worshiped God in the midst of all those things happening like David. And so we get, a view from the outside of all the events, an objective view of the events, while we get this beautiful inside first person view of David's experiences and his encounters with God and the way he turns to God in the midst of everything that's happening. And so here we are, Psalm 52. And David says, why do you boast of your evil, you tyrant, when God's mercies are present every day? And he's talking about Saul, but also about Doeg the Edomite. He's like, man, everybody else knew you don't kill priests. You're a godless man and you boasting of your strength. I mean, to kill priests, to kill people who were worshiping God, they didn't have no swords on their sides. They weren't strapped and ready for war. They were in a place of refuge. They were in a place of worship. Nobody was planning to be attacked by you. And you're boasting like you did a great thing. Like David he's just so saddened in his heart because Abiathar has brought him the news of what has happened. And so he is just angered by this evil that has risen up. Okay, so Saul is crazy and he's under demonic influence. But Doeg, what's your excuse? You're in a clear mind and you still listen to that order that everybody else knew was evil and followed it out and killed all these people. And to kill a town full of priests means he killed the men, the women, and the children. He wiped the whole town out, and Abiathar is the only one that escaped. So now David says in verse 7 in the complete Jewish, verse 5 in other versions, this is why God will strike you down, seize you, pluck you from your tent, and uproot you from the land of the living. So he knows, okay, God's not going to let this just go. He's going to bring justice forward. Of course, we know he brings justice on Saul. We don't know what happens to Doeg the Edomite, but I'm sure it's not good because God is a God of justice. And he says, you wouldn't make God your refuge, but you trusted in your own wealth and your own evil plots. Then he talks about himself. But I am like a leafy olive tree in the house of God. I put my trust in the grace of God forever and ever. He talks about how he will praise God and keep hoping in his name. And he will, for this is what is good in the presence of the faithful. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song, just revealing to us how we need to turn to Yahweh in the challenging times that we may find ourselves in. So now, Psalm 57 is another one that I want you to read. Again of David, and he says, it's the beginning, when he fled from Saul into the cave. That's the cave at Adullam. That, of course, was in the area of Benjamin as he was going toward Judah. So this is all desert area as he's going toward Judah. And so he's praying for God for favor. that for refuge, that he's taking refuge in God. He says, I call to God the Most High, the God who is accomplishing his purpose for me. And you remember I said to you, this is why God is protecting him, because he's still got a purpose to fulfill. And David is trusting in the Lord. And this is so important because we have to meet God where he's working. If we know we still have a purpose to fulfill, then we got to have the faith that is going to allow us to fulfill the purpose. We can give up hope and die untimely deaths, even in the midst of tribulation and all this stuff, if we stop believing in God. But if we trust God like David did, and we cry out to God and worship God, and we know I have not done everything you put me here to do yet, then we can trust in him, find a refuge in him, and his hand of protection will be on us, though we're persecuted by wicked people. He talks about being surrounded by lions. He's still on the run. He prepared a snare for my feet. But this is what he says in verse 8 in the complete Jewish, and verse 7 of the Virgins. My heart is steadfast, God, steadfast. I will sing and make music, which is so beautiful because he's like, look, I'm on the run. I'm homeless. I don't have anything, but I'm going to worship you. I am going to choose to worship you. And that is such an important revelation for us, because we have way more right now than David had at that time. And many have forsaken worship. Many have decided, well, it's too much going on. I'm not going to worship God. If David can worship God when he is pretty much lost everything, we can do the same thing. We can worship God. And if you find it hard to do, connect with someone else and allow them to begin to worship, and then you connect with their worship. See, this is why David went back to Jonathan. He had to be encouraged. He had to be encouraged. Now, I've shared with you guys, after my stepdaughter Imani died, I called my mom, and my mom just pulled worship out of me. Like she pulled it out of my soul. And that was so important. And this is why we can't forsake the gathering together of ourselves. We have got to connect with God's people, because there are times when you can't even get a prayer to come out of you. You can't get a worship to come out of you. But people who are in covenant relationship with God and covenant with you, you can connect with them and they can worship, and then you can start to worship. That worship can be released. Even Saul, with his crazy, evil self, when he was around the prophets, he began to prophesy. The Spirit of God is transferable. That worship will touch you. And the reality is we need it. We need each other. We need that connection. And David made the connection he needed to make. And then his family shows up and encourages him in the cave of Adullam, which is where he's actually speaking of right now. The men of the town start to show up and encourage him and join him. And he's like, you know what, God, I'm going to worship you. That is such a blessing. We absolutely must do that and allow God to bless us, because we need him. We don't worship God because God needs to worship. We worship God because we need to worship. Now, we love to worship him, and he loves to receive the worship. But the reality is, with regard to need, we're the ones who need it. So now, let's go to Revelation chapter 7. And we're going to go kind of the revelator. These people dressed in robes, who are they and where are they from? Now, this is so funny because the angels operate like God, because the Spirit of the living God is within them. God does that all the time. He will ask you a question he knows you don't know the answer to, so that you will ask him back, because he wants to share something with you. He wants to engage you in conversation. And this is why I tell you guys to talk to God. Ask him questions. Share your hopes, dreams, fears with him. Interact with him, because he wants to interact with you. This is why this angel asked John a question that he knows John doesn't know the answer to. So John is like, sir, I don't know. You know. And he's like, I do. And then he's kind of like, I'm glad you asked. And so the angel then tells him, these are the people who come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white with the blood of the Lamb. This is why they're before God's throne. Day and night they serve him in his temple. And the one who sits on the throne will put his Shekinah, that's his glory, upon them. They will never again be hungry, never again be thirsty. The sun will not beat down on them, nor will any burning heat. And that's so interesting, because that's what David is experiencing at this time. And then what he is doing is washing his robe in the tribulation. And his tribulation is the tribulation of Saul. And he's washing his robe in his tribulation, and he's being encouraged as he worships that one day he'll never be hungry or thirsty or on the run ever again. The sun of this desert that he's in won't beat down on him anymore. Like the very thing that we see being spoken about this multitude in white is what we know is the promise of God, even for David and for each one of us as well. Then we've got verse 17, which is a memory scripture for you, and it reads, "For the Lamb in the center of the throne will shepherd them, will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes." So this is a promise we got to hold on to. we've got to know that we are of this multitude. We are of those who are washing our robes in the blood of the Lamb as we continue to hold fast to his covenant, as we continue to be sustained in our faith in the midst of tribulation. What he's doing is washing our robes in his own blood so that we are deemed righteous because of his sacrifice and the fact that we hold on to him as we go through. Now let's go to day 4. God answers the prayers of his people. That's the topic for this day, and we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapters 23 and 24. Now, in 1 Samuel chapter 23, we see these people in a town called Keilah, and in Hebrew is Keilah, where you see the vowels are separated, Keilah, but we say Keilah in English. And the Philistines have come to attack them, and they would attack people whenever they could encounter a town of Israel. They just attack it, try to take it over, because they're trying to gain territory from Israel. They want to take all the land from Israel, which is still the fight that we see happening today between the Palestinians and Israel. Let's take towns from them. We want the towns. This is the very fight that we see happening here in the scriptures right now. And so, because Palestinian comes from Philistine, this is who they're descended from. And so, what we see here is the Philistines have attacked Keilah, and David asked the Lord, should we go and save this town? And the Lord answers him, yes. Now, how does he get this answer? Remember, he's encountered a prophet, but who is with him every day right at his side is Abiathar, the priest. And he took the ephod of his father with him and has the Urim and the Thummim in it. So David can inquire of God now through the priest that is with him and find out what God will have him do, which is so important because we have the Holy Spirit and we can inquire of God. This is an important season to be asking God questions, because there are times when you may think you know the will of God and you'll be wrong. And then you'll realize from the fruit of it, the results of your choice, that, man, maybe that wasn't God's will. We don't want to be in that situation. We want to ask God at the onslaught. We want to ask him at the beginning, is this your will for me? Is this not your will for me? And wait for the Holy Spirit to give us shalom in our souls with which way is the will of Yahweh. Because the way that is Yahweh's will is going to give us a beautiful shalom, and God himself will confirm it. And so that's what you want to know. You want to know what's his will, and you want to operate in his will. So David is inquiring of the Lord to find out, should we go and fight these Philistines against Keilah? Now, of course, David is willing to do it. That's not why he's asking. He's asking because he knows if he shows up to fight on somebody's behalf in Israel. See, Keilah is in Israel, and the Philistines are fighting these guys. If he shows up to fight a fight, he knows God will give him the victory, but he also knows that Saul's going to find out where he is. And he's hiding. He's on the run. Not only is he now himself, but he's worried about Abiathar, whose whole family just been massacred. He's worried about his men who've shown up for him, shown up in this area and just blessed him. And so, and he's worried about his family, his parents, who had shown up to him as well. And so he's like, look, Lord, I'll do it, but I want to make sure it's you, because if it's not you, then he's going to, Saul's going to find out, and then I'm probably going to die. And so he doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want his men to die. He doesn't want Abiathar to die. He doesn't want his family to be in jeopardy. And so the Lord tells him, yes, go out and go down to Keilah, because I will hand the Philistines over to you. So he does it. After he wins, the Philistines are pushed back. David, kills many of them. David and his men kill many of them. Then he says, Lord, should I leave Keilah? Will these people give me over to Saul? And the Lord says, yes, Saul is going to come down. And yes, the men of Keilah will turn you over to Saul. And so God uses David to answer the prayers of the people of Keilah. But then David has to leave Keilah because his prayer is to be free from Saul and not die. And the people of Keilah are going to hand him over. And so it's so important that we keep inquiring of God. And David, you're going to see this throughout the scriptures. He keeps inquiring of the Lord. He keeps asking God, should I do this or should I do that? Should I do this or should I do that? He keeps asking because he doesn't presume to know. He doesn't think he knows what's best. He doesn't think his reasoning or his wisdom can figure it out. He knows there's all types of stuff going on. And if he doesn't inquire of the Lord, the enemy is going to have his way. And David is too important for what God is doing for that to happen. And so he's like, I need to fulfill what Samuel said was going to happen. I need to be king, because clearly the nation needs a new king, because Saul was using his mind and the devil is using him. So I've got to fulfill this purpose, Lord. So give me the guidance. Show me what I need to do so that I can actually fulfill your will on the earth. And that's the thing that we got to do too. We got to do that very same thing. Many of us have more time now than we've had before, so there's no excuse for not inquiring of the Lord. Even if you got to get up early, even if you got to stay up late, inquire of God and find out what His will is, because He will answer the prayers of His people. When you ask Him what His will is, He will reveal it to you. And so I want to encourage you to absolutely do that. And so we see here that he inquires of the Lord through Abiathar, his ritual vest, and then we see him escaping because Saul is going to pursue him, and Saul does try to pursue him, but he does not catch up with David. God allows David to continue to slip through Saul's hands, which is so important because now he's able to continue to live. And then we see here, I have underlined in my Bible, in verse 16, that Jonathan actually finds David and actually encourages him again. And so they do have this other additional encounter. There's only one sentence. They kind of, underlines that I have underlined here that they do encounter each other, and he is encouraged, and he says this one thing to him: don't be afraid, because my father's forces will not find you. You'll be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. And then Shaul, my father, knows this too. And they make a covenant, they kiss each other, and then Jonathan returns home, and David stays there in Horeb. Now, these same people, these Ziphites, here in Keilah, tell Saul, David is hiding among us in the stronghold of Horesh. So now the people of Keilah, he escaped from Keilah. Now we got the Ziphites who see him and turn him over to Saul. And Saul comes down and he blesses the Ziphites. Oh, thank you for being so, for thinking of me. And he wants to kill David in cold blood. But he makes himself out to be the victim and thanks these Ziphites for thinking of him and being compassionate to him and telling him where David is. And then he starts to pursue David. And David is going on one side of the mountain and Saul is going on the other side of the mountain. But then the Philistines start to attack, and so Saul backs down out of the mountain and has to go fight the Philistines. And the Lord allowed that to happen because at the top of the mountain there would have been nowhere else to go. He would have got to David. And so he pulls Saul away. Again, God is answering David's prayers, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So now David goes up into En-Gedi, which is an oasis in the desert of Judah. And then Saul has some men, and he's still looking for David in this place where David is in En-Gedi. He's looking for David, and Saul goes into a cave to relieve himself. But David and his men are way back in that same cave. And so David's men are certainly telling him, look, the Lord has handed Saul over to you. And David's like, nope. Lord forbid that I should put my hand on his anointed. Meaning God's going to handle Saul. God made him king. God will make him, take him down from the kingship. I'm not going to be the one that removes him from this position of honor because I didn't put him there. God did. And so I'm not putting my hand on him. But David cuts the corner of Saul's garment, and he's grief-stricken. He feels bad that he cuts it, didn't even touch his garment. And so when Saul goes out, David then cries out to him, and he says, why are you listening to people saying that I want to kill you? I don't want to kill you. I don't want to hurt you. I'm not treacherous. I'm not a traitor. I just want to serve and be, the servant I've always been to you. And then, of course, now Saul is conscience-stricken because his whole army is there. Because remember, they were retreating to go address these Philistines. So Saul got his army, David got his men. Saul is in front of his army and realizing that not only is David confessing, hey, I'm not trying to kill you, and calling him to task, why are you trying to kill me? But now David has the corner of his garment and he's showing him, I could have killed you. In the dark, when you went to relieve yourself, I could have killed you. You didn't even know I was there. And Saul realizes, okay, God has handed me over to this boy. He could have definitely killed me. And if I was him, I would have killed him. And so David says, may the Lord judge between us. And then Saul has to say back to him, you're more righteous than I am. Saul acknowledges you are much more righteous than I am because I definitely would have killed you. In fact, I was here trying to kill you right now. That's the reality of what's happening here. And so then he says to David in verse 20 to complete Jewish, verse 19 other versions, a man finds his enemy and lets him go unharmed. May Adonai reward you well for what you did to me today. Now I'm certain that you will indeed become king, and that the kingship of Israel will be established in your hands. So swear to me by Adonai that you will not kill my descendants after I die, or blot out my name from my father's family. And David swears it. Now he has already made covenant with Jonathan, that he would bless Jonathan and Jonathan's children forever. Now he's making covenant with Saul that, look, I'm not going to just go and try to kill up all your descendants when I become king. Which is so interesting because David didn't have to make that covenant with him. David's like, no, I'm not saying anything to you. I could have killed you, I didn't kill you. That's enough. But he doesn't. He still makes his promise to Saul. But notice, Saul doesn't make a promise to David. He doesn't say, I'm going to stop tracking you down and stop trying to kill you. He doesn't make a promise to David. David is the only one who makes a promise here. Saul continues on his murderous plot, which we're going to see later. It's kind of like Pharaoh, who asked Moses to pray for him, but then later on changed his mind and the heart hardens up again. This is what happens when people are under the influence of demons. They don't care. They don't keep their word. They're not honorable. They're not trustworthy. They will continue to try to just persecute God's people, even when God's people are good to them. And so David realizes, I still have to stay away from Saul. And he does. He continues to stay away from Saul even after this encounter, which is wise for him. So now let's go to Psalm 54. As we continue to look at this topic, God answers the prayers of his people. This is a psalm of David. And this psalm says specifically when the Ziphites had gone to Saul and said, is not David hiding among us? So he wrote this after he saved the people at Keilah and then fled. And then the Ziphites said, hey, David is right here hiding. He writes this song. God, deliver me by your name and your power, vindicate me. God, hear my prayer. Listen to the words of my mouth. For foreigners are rising against me. Violent men are seeking my life. They give no thought to God. But God is helping me. Adonai is my support. May he repay the evil to those who are lying in wait for me. In your faithfulness, destroy them. Then I will generously sacrifice to you. I will praise your name, Adonai, because it is good, because he rescued me from all trouble, and my eyes will triumph on my enemies. And this is so beautiful because the reality is, if I'm on the run from a king and his entire army, and the people I'm hiding among turn me over to the king, I don't know that I will pause enough to write a song. I can't say that I would do that. But David does. And what a beautiful revelation. This warrior psalmist, when he's being pursued, hunted down, and leading men, like leadership can draw from you. I know as a leader, people need this, people need that. They have questions, they're concerned, they have issues. You got to inspire them, you got to give them. And there's a lot happening with him right now, but he stops and writes Psalm 54, which is such a blessing because he is never going to rob God of the glory that is due his name. And we can learn so much from David in that really stopping to worship was the most important thing that he could do. So I also want you to read Psalm 63 on this day, which I've titled My Heart Thirsts for You in a Dry and Parched Land. And it says that David's in the desert of Judah. And that's where he was when he's in En-Gedi. En-Gedi is in the desert of Judah. It's actually an oasis in the desert. But he doesn't hit the oasis immediately. So we actually talked about being in a dry and thirsty land. And he talks about, being parched. Like he is literally in the desert. Like this. Most of us read this as a metaphor. But when David is writing this psalm, and he says, my heart thirsts for you, his body is dehydrated. Like that's what's happening. My body longs for you in the land, parched and dry. He's talking about being physically dehydrated, but he's saying more than that, my soul is dehydrated. My soul wants you. And what's so beautiful, the fact that he places the higher precedence on the fact that his soul is longing for God, God shows up and brings him to an oasis, which is just an amazing, amazing thing. Because people die in the desert. The desert of Judah and Benjamin, because it goes from that desert is one desert. It goes from Judah down to Benjamin, and David has crossed this desert a couple of times at this point. It is a long area. Like to stay strictly on the road, to drive on the road in a car from the time when this desert starts to go down into the city at the base of the desert by the Red Sea, where it's no longer a desert area. It's over a 3-hour drive. So now you're in a car. It takes you over 3 hours to drive it. Imagine you're walking it. And it's hot. And there's no water. And there's no food. There is nothing. Imagine how long it takes to walk through this desert. And he is walking and does not know if he's going to have water. He does not know if when or how God is going to provide for him. But he's talking to God more about his spiritual thirst for God than about his physical thirst for water. which is an amazing thing because he declares, my lips will worship you, which is so beautiful because right before he says, he says, your grace is better than life. So it's really like, if I die, I'm going to worship you because it's not even all about my life. It's about the fact that I'm going to worship you. I'm going to choose to worship you. And that is what we mean. Like, this is so beautiful when you read that. Like, really read this and remember, David is in a physical desert when he's writing this. Look at how he is focusing on the Lord, which is so beautiful because most of us would have spent much more time focusing on our circumstances rather than focusing on what the Lord is doing. Now, let's go to Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. Revelation 8, 1 through 5. And it reads as follows. When the Lamb broke the seventh seal, now remember, this is the last seal. So everything from this chapter, chapter 8, up to chapter 18 is coming out of this seal. And it's important that we get that. The seventh seal, so if you're looking at a scroll, and it's got 7 seals on it, when the 7th seal is broken, now the scroll can be opened, and all the stuff that's on the scroll can now be read aloud. And as we see in the heavenly realm, it actually is coming to pass because it's prophecy. So as the scroll is being opened, the prophecy is coming forward. Now, each of the seals, those 6 seals before this, were allowing the scroll to open just a little bit. So for each one of those 6 seals, something happened because the scroll has been opened a little bit. When the 7th seal is open here in chapter 8 of Revelation, that means the whole scroll is open, and there's words of lament, mourning, and woe on both sides. So the prophecy that is in this scroll is now being unleashed into the earth now that the 7th seal has been broken. Okay, so it says, when the Lamb broke the 7th seal, because he's the only one who can, there was silence in heaven for what seemed like half an hour. And there's a reverence there. That's people knowing, oh wow, something is about to happen. And they're waiting because they don't know what's about to happen. But the fear of Yahweh is causing them to be silent before him because they don't know what God is going to do. But they know that now that scroll is open, completely open, something is going to happen. Everything written on that scroll, which nobody could read because it was sealed, now everything written on that scroll is going to be unleashed. Verse 2. Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and they were given 7 shofars. Now this number 7 is really important in the book of Revelation. It is throughout the Bible because we know 7 is never completion, which means they're doing a complete work. The 7th seal is broken, so now the complete prophecy is revealed. 7 angels stand before Yahweh, and they've got 7 shofars because they're declaring the fullness of the judgment that is now going forward. Verse 3. Another angel came and stood at the altar with a gold incense bowl, and he was given a large quantity of incense to add to the prayers of God's people. Now, this is very important. So we got prayers that are going forth before God's people, gathered in this gold bowl of incense. Okay? Because it says here that the incense is the prayers of God's people. It's going to see that. So we've got the prayers. We've got the gold bowl of incense. Then we've also got something that's being added to this. Okay? He's given this large quantity of incense. He adds it to the prayers of God's people. Verse 4, on the gold altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense went up with the prayers of God's people from the hand of the angel before God. And look at what happens in verse 5. It's very important. Then the angel took the incense bowl filled with the fire from the altar and threw it down on the earth. And there followed peals of thunder, voices, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now, what's so important to understand this is that, God is not like man. Isaiah 55 tells us that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts and his ways are higher than our ways. So God's people are praying. What's been added to the prayers is incense. But in order for this incense to now burn, because incense has to burn to release that sweet smelling savor, fire from God's altar is added to this incense. So we got prayers, incense, fire from the altar of God. And this fire now is thrown onto the earth. And this is so important that we get this because the picture is judgment. And it's interesting because most of us think when we pray, when God is collecting our prayers and this bowl of incense is full of our prayers, he's going to pour back out blessings. Most of us do not see judgment as a blessing, but it is. Because for those who are praying, Lord, get me out of this abusive situation. when God judges the abusers and they are arrested, or the crime spree has been stopped, or whatever, or when people are taken out of homes where they've been abused, or they're taken out of or governments are overthrown where they're being persecuted and slaughtered and things like that. When God pours the judgment back on earth because they've been praying, God deliver us, the prayers mixed with the incense, which blesses the Lord, but it can only bless the Lord when the fire of the judgment is added to it, and then all that is poured back on the earth. God answers the prayers of these people, the same ones whose robes were being washed in tribulation. They're going through trials, they're going through challenges, persecution. He adds judgment fire to their prayers. Incense, which blesses him, and judgment fire, which goes back onto the earth. And so the answer to prayers becomes judgment. And most of us don't think in that way. Because of replacement theology, we've been taught that, the blessings go to the church, which is going to be not just believers, but is really mostly representing the Western world. And then the judgments go to Israel, unbelievers. And we don't really realize that we all live in this world together. And so when God answers the prayers of his people, the answers come back in judgment. He's judging on behalf of his people, that the oppression will be removed, that we be set free, that we be able to fulfill our kingdom purposes. But the judgment has to hit the wicked. And if the wicked have been leading industries and nations and families, it's still going to affect the righteous people who are part of those nations and industries and families. And this is important that we get that, because that's the very thing we're saying right now. God has heard our prayers. He's listened to our intercession. He's collected our tears. They've gone up to heaven. They've been collected and added to incense that is blessing him. But fire of judgment is also being added to it. So the only way he can answer our prayers is that he has to judge in our favor. And to judge in our favor, he has to judge against the wickedness that's happening in the earth. And with a replacement theology mentality, most of us do not understand that in order to answer our prayers, he has to judge. And because we don't want judgment. We don't want anybody to go through anything challenging. But the wicked will not stop being wicked unless they're judged. And this is something we see David realizing. Saul, even after David's been compassionate to him, I'm telling you right now, he did a little bit. Saul's going to keep chasing him and trying to kill him. Saul is not going to stop trying to kill David until he dies. Even though David has been nothing but good to him, Saul will not stop being wicked. And this is the very thing that causes God to pour judgment back onto the earth. Because those who refuse deliverance, those who refuse to repent, those who refuse to break their covenants with the enemy will continue to be wicked until God himself stops them. And the only way that he uses to stop them is to judge on behalf of his people, but to judge against them, to release judgment upon them. This is why during Passover we drink the cup of judgment, because he's judging on our behalf, but he's judging against the oppressors. He's judging against the destroyer, who's the enemy. He's judging against our adversary and accuser, who is Satan. You see what I'm saying? And so it becomes so important that we get that in order for God to do what he wants to do in the earth, he has to pour judgment out. He has to. And he is slow to do it because he's trying to give those who are acting wickedly an opportunity to repent. He doesn't want to have to judge them. But in the meantime, while he's giving them an opportunity to repent, they continue to persecute the righteous. So for God to answer the prayers, at some point he has to put an end to it. And then they no longer have opportunity to repent because he judges them. And that's it. Now it's over. And that becomes so important that we get that, because there has to be a finality to it. For him to answer our prayers, at some point he's got to address wickedness. He can't answer our prayers and not address wickedness. He has to address wickedness. So it's important for us that we make sure that we are washing our robes in the blood of the Lamb, that he is continually delivering us, continually ministering to us. So when judgment comes, we are not being judged. Instead, judgment is on our behalf. That's so important that we get that. Amen. Amen. So now, let us look at the next day. Judgment on fools. That's what the topic is. Judgment on fools. Now we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 25 and chapter 26. And we're going to see that David has an encounter with a man named Nabal. Now, this is what's important, okay? So Samuel dies. We see this at the beginning. It's important that you know Samuel dies here. He dies and they bury him at his home in Ramah. David goes out to the Paran desert and he meets a man who has property in Carmel. He's a wealthy man, and David and his men actually protect this man Nabal's shepherds and flocks and all this stuff. He protects his servants and his wealth, which is going to be his flocks and herds and things like that. So when it comes time to shear his sheep, which means that, the sheep have these big thick coats of wool. Like I'm telling you, if a sheep is this big, it might have so much wool on it like that it looks like it's this big. It looks like it's this fat, but it's not. The sheep is like this big, but all that is wool. And so when it's time to shear the sheep, which is going to be coming into the springtime, because they don't really need all that hair on them in the springtime. They grow the hair in the winter to keep them warm, or the wool. They grow the wool in the winter to keep them warm. In the springtime, you shave it off of them, one, so that they can be cool, but two, so that you can make stuff off the wool. So literally, when it comes time to shear his sheep, the ball is about to make some money, because he's got all these sheep with all these big, fat, woolly coats, and he's going to sell that wool to merchants who make wool garments, which is very, this is a prosperous season for him. So when it comes time to shear his sheep, and David knows this man is prosperous now because he's selling his wool for these sheep, David sends his men to go address Nabal. And they say to Nabal, we're travelers. We know that this is a festive time for you because you're shearing your sheep. Would you please bless us and share some of the good of your household with us? And Nabal just berates David's men. He just talks terrible to them. And who is this David? Who is this son of Yishai or Jesse? There are many servants nowadays running away from their masters. Am I supposed to take my bread and my water and my meat that I slaughtered from my shearers and give it to the men coming from who knows where? And just talks nasty to them. Now, for most of us, that's actually the norm. We're used to people doing stuff like that. We would never just go up to some stranger's house and say, hey, we know this is a festive time for you. Would you mind giving some food and some water for, my family? Most of us wouldn't do that. And we see people, homeless people do it all the time. And we see how people get a job. They say all types of stuff to them. Some people even hit them. And that's a norm in our society. In David's society, that was not the norm. And see, that's because wickedness is running rampant in this day and age. In David's society, that was not the norm. If there was a festive time for you and you were wealthy and there were travelers, there was an unwritten law of hospitality that required you to take care of them, to bless them, to feed them, because you had enough wealth to do it and because they were in need of it. There were not hotels along the road. I mean, there might have been an inn or two, but not like we have now. There weren't restaurants along the road. So somebody was traveling. They depended upon the hospitality of other people. That was the only way they could survive if they were traveling, because there were not going to be rest stops and stuff like that along the way for them to refresh themselves. They had to stop in the homes of strangers. Now, David is not even a complete stranger because, like I said, he and his men were camped near Nabal's men during the whole season where the sheep were growing the wool. And they would not allow any raiders like the Amalekites or the Philistines to come and steal any of the sheep or kill any of the shepherds of Nabal. They were a wall of protection around these guys. So all of Nabal's men know exactly who David and his men are, because David has been a protector for him. Because David is training his men to be warriors. Just like he had trained Saul's army to be warriors, he's training his men now to be warriors. The spirit of the living God is on all of them, and they didn't allow anybody to touch Nabal's guys the whole season where the sheep were growing this wool. Now that the fruit is coming forth, that's really a result of David's men being a hedge of protection around Nabal's men. Nabal's going to try to act like David is a nobody from nowhere and just really dishonor him, which, like I said, was just something that wasn't done during this time. So he's really, really being horrible. He's being nasty. Like, this is not something that was done in David's age. The request actually was not an abnormal request of his time. It wasn't abnormal at all. It's foreign to us because we're in the age of independence and blah, 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 blah. We don't really interact in our communities. Like I said, we have resources that we can connect with if we're traveling. And so this is not something we would do in this day and age if we, unless we were homeless. But this is normal for David's day. This is actually normal, what's happening right now. And Nabal is just nasty to him. And so David goes, oh, okay, so that's how this is going to be. Men, strap on your swords. We're about to go take out Nabal and every man in his household. So all those guys they have protected during those winter months, they're about to go kill all of them. The only people they're going to allow to live is women and children. This is what David's claims. You know, remember, Nabal, he's not a Philistine. He's not an Amalekite. He is a child of Israel. They're in Carmel. So David is about to kill an Israelite and slaughter him and slaughter all them in his household because he disrespected David. And it was a big disrespect. Like, it wasn't a little thing that he said. Like, this is a big deal what has happened here. But still, David's about to kill an Israelite and all of them in his household as if they were people who were not in Israel. And so Abigail, Nabal's wife, hears about this because the servants go, listen, you heard him? He just spoke terribly to David's men. And you know who David is. He's the one they saying, Saul has killed his 1,000, David's 10,000. That guy, he just said that to David. And we know that unless something happens to change this situation, we're going to all be dead by morning. Like, we already know how this is going to play out. And so she quickly goes and gets food together and all this stuff. And she goes to meet David while he's on his way to her house. And she jumps off of her animal and she prostrates herself before David. And she says, please forgive me, charging against me. I'm sorry. I didn't know you came because I would have blessed you. I would have cooked food for y'all. I would have blessed y'all. I would have done it. Nabal is a fool. That's what his name means. What she says, she's like, don't listen to this fool because he is not honoring God. He's not a God-honoring man. He just isn't. And so please forgive my whole household and accept these gifts from me. So she feeds them and pretty much gives the stuff that they ask for. David thanks her for her wisdom and for her cool-headedness because he's been hot-headed at that moment. And he goes, thank you for keeping me from shedding the blood of a fellow Israelite, because I have been a man of war and I shed the blood of the people I was supposed to shed. But this guy, I was about to just kill him because he upset me. And you're right. It's not something I should do, because she says, far be it from you, honorable man of God, to have this blood in your hands. He's like, you're right. You're right. I'm not supposed to do this. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. You're a good woman. Thank you for coming to me. And she even acknowledges, like, we know that God's favor is on you. He's going to be king. Like, just don't pay attention to this fool who is her husband. And so then, of course, Nabal has his shearers, of course, have sheared the sheep. He's got all this wealth back from the wool, and he having a feast fit for a king. He gets drunk. She comes back. He's drunk. And she waits until the morning when he's sobering up. And then she says to him, listen, I just met David on the road and all of his warriors, and they were going to come. They were coming to kill you. And that little drunken feast you had last night? If I had not met them on the road, in the midst of your drunkenness, you and every man in his household would have been dead. And the women and children would have been taken as their servants. And he gets, it says that he gets kind of like stoned. Because basically he has like a heart attack or a stroke or something. And he dies. And this is important to get that, because what happens is the Lord now avenges David. And the only person who was supposed to die was Nabal. He was the one who dishonored God and the man of God. But they was going to kill the whole household for men, is what was going to happen. He didn't, though, because Abigail was wise. And when David finds out that Nabal has died, he blesses Abigail in the same way she blessed him. She stopped him from shedding innocent blood. He sends word for her to become his wife, now David's wife. And again, this is him honoring her, because a woman being left with this estate, Nabal, her husband, is dead, was just open prey for people, because she's got wealth, but she's a woman, so she doesn't have that covering, that protection during this day and age. And it would have been a challenging time for her. She would have gone through challenges. Is she wealthy? Yes, but she'd have been a prey for some other man to try to come usurp her husband's wealth. And so when David says, you honor me, you bless me, now I will honor you, come and be my wife, she takes her maidens with her and says, I'm your servant, and she goes to be David's wife. And then, of course, somebody, raises up as the one who continues on with Nabal's wealth, but she becomes David's wife. And again, she knows he's going to be next king. Everybody knows about David. They know what's happening. And so she's now put into this position of honor, which is beautiful. Now, meanwhile, you see here, verse 44, Shaul had given Michal, which is David's wife, as his daughter, to Palti, or Paltiel, which is in other versions, the son of Laish, to be his wife. And this is important to get that, because as David takes Abigail as a wife, his wife Michal is being given away. And it's not because Saul was like, oh, David's got another wife, he doesn't need her. That's not what happened. Because, of course, men of standing in this time had multiple wives. What's happening is that Saul is saying, oh, my plan didn't work. Michal is not able to track David for me, so I might as well give it to somebody else. And again, it's Saul being opportunistic. He's using his daughter again, and putting her in a position he wants her to be in, as opposed to really doing God's will for her, because she's not divorced from David. She didn't divorce David. David didn't divorce her. Saul didn't initiate a divorce. There's no divorce happening here. She is still David's wife. But then he gives her to another man to be that man's wife, as if he's disregarding David. Like in his mind, well, David's going to be dead anyway. I'm probably going to kill him. So just go ahead and marry this guy. I mean, it's just a terrible incident that's happening here. But again, Michal does not stand up against her father. She does not take a stand, which she really should have, because now she is outside the will of Yahweh. She got two husbands, and that is not biblical at all. She's not going to have two husbands. And she's in a bad position. So now let's go to the next chapter. 1 Samuel chapter 26. We see the Ziphites again tell Saul, hey, David is hiding among us. Let me tell you where he is. He's at the Hakila hill across from Yeshimon. And Saul is excited. He goes out to try to kill David again. But then David now has another opportunity to kill him. What happens is Saul's troops are all in their tents, camped out while traveling to try to kill David. The Lord puts a deep sleep on them. David actually walks into Saul's camp while the whole army is sleeping. Now, let me tell you, having been trained in Marine Corps ROTC and Army ROTC, having been at boot camp at Paris Island and Officers Candidate School at Quantico, I can tell you that everybody was not supposed to be asleep. Somebody was supposed to be on watch. Not just one somebody, but a few somebodies was supposed to be on watch, because the king is in the camp. There's no way the whole army is supposed to be asleep at the same time that the king is asleep. Like, that's not supposed to happen. They're supposed to be on shifts, doing night watches. Somebody's supposed to be patrolling the perimeter. They're not all supposed to be asleep. But the scripture tells us that it was a deep sleep that had come from God. So it wasn't that they had all planned to go to sleep. Probably whoever was even on watch is now asleep, because God has just put them all in a deep sleep, because he's handing Saul over to David again. David is wise enough to know, just because Saul has been handed over to me doesn't mean I'm supposed to kill him. God's making a point. So he goes in all the way into Saul's tent while these men are asleep. And he takes the spear and the water jug that's by Saul's head. So Saul's spear by his head, so that in case something happens in the middle of the night, he's got his weapon, which is so funny. Most men do that. They got a weapon somewhere near them in case something happens at night. And he's got water by his bed, which is another thing people do. They have the water, by their bed in case they get thirsty in the middle of the night. So this is what Saul has. His spear, he has a water jug by his head in his tent. David goes all the way, because if the king is in this camp, that means the king is going to be in the center of the camp. So David has had to go through all these soldiers, around all their little tents and encampments, to get to Saul's tent. Saul's tent is not on the outskirts. Saul's tent is not on the edge. Saul's tent is in the middle of this camp. David is walking in through all these soldiers into this place and goes right into Saul's tent, takes the spear and the jug that's by his head. Then he goes on top of the mountain and he calls out to the leader of Saul's army, who at this time I believe is Abner. Let me make sure. Yep, Abner. Abner, son of Ner, is the leader of Saul's army. He's the one who's still been the leader. He's the leader of Saul's army when David killed Goliath. Same guy. And he calls out to Abner, because remember, David used to be a leader in Saul's army as well. So he knows that the Abner is the chief commander of Saul's army. He calls out to him, going, "You ought to die. Somebody came in the camp and could have killed your king, and you were sleeping." And then Saul wakes up and he goes, "Oh, David, is that you, my son David?" And he's like, "Yes, me. You tried to kill me again. You're still trying to kill me. I could have killed you again. I didn't do it." And then this time, Saul, of course, he says again, "Oh, I've sinned. David, you should come back with me, because I promise I won't try to harm you any longer." Now he finally promises he's not going to try to kill him anymore. David doesn't believe him. He's smart enough not to believe Saul, but he is now proving to the entire army that he is a man of righteousness, that he is a good man. And this is so key. Most people don't understand what's happening here. At some point, this army is going to have to follow David. And David is sowing a seed of righteousness in his future army, because they have seen 2 times when David could have killed Saul, the king, but rather than trying to overthrow the king, he is acknowledging that God has put Saul in that place of leadership. So literally, David is sowing into his own future. We're not going to see any coups, except for David's own son Absalom, try to take over David's kingship. And of course, that's a result of David's own sin with Bathsheba. But nobody else is going to just try to just take over David's kingship, because David is sowing a seed here. He's sowing a seed of righteousness. He's sowing a seed of loyalty. He's sowing a seed of submission to the will of Yahweh and honoring God's anointed. And literally, you will reap what you sow. He's sowing in front of this army submission and honor, even when the king is dead wrong. And everybody knows the king is wrong. These same guys were there when he asked them to kill that town full of priests, and they wouldn't do it. Point being, the seeds that David is sowing here, as God is giving him opportunity to sow beautiful seeds. See, most people would interpret this as David's men did. God is giving you opportunity to kill Saul. God is giving David the opportunity to demonstrate his godly character in front of the army that's one day going to have to follow him. And this is a beautiful, beautiful setup, because in this moment, his leadership and his character is rising to the top. And that is a seed that he's going to really reap beautiful benefits from later on. So what happens then is that Saul finally leaves, because he's like, okay, I said I wasn't going to try to kill David no more. And not that it goes away from his heart, but he's not going to have opportunity anymore, because David's not going to give him opportunity. David's going to make a decision at this point that's going to shift everything. And so Saul's not going to have opportunity to chase him anymore, which is why the promise of Saul is going to be fulfilled. He's going to stop chasing him, not because of Saul, but because of David. But again, we see a beautiful seed sown where the army is going to now honor David, because they see David honoring Saul, even though Saul is a fool. Nabal is a fool, got judged. Saul is a fool, and he gets revealed in front of his army for being just that, a man who has no honor, because he'd already been revealed as a dishonorable man before them. And of course, that is sealed even in this moment all the more. So now I want to take you to Psalm 54. And in Psalm 54, oh wait, nope, not that one, we read that one. We are in Psalm 53, Psalm 53. And Psalm 53, this is a maskil of David. And it starts with, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And it's important that we're reading this psalm. The reason we're reading this psalm is because, remember, Nabal's name means fool. And we see Saul just continue to be foolish. Why? The Bible defines a fool as a person who doesn't believe in God, who either doesn't believe God exists or doesn't submit to God, chooses to be rebellious against God. Point being, we see this judgment that is falling on those who are rebelling against God, or not really believing in the will and ways of God. And so this is where David is pointing out about this fool. And he says they are corrupt, their ways are vile, there is no one who does good, among these fools. God looks out from heaven upon the human race to see if even one is wise, if even one seeks God. But everybody's turned away, everybody's become corrupt. And these evildoers, they know nothing. They try to devour God's people like eating bread. They never call on God, but there they are overwhelmed with dread. When there's nothing to dread, God will scatter them and attack them and put shame on them. And then he says in verse 6, oh, the salvation for Israel will come out of Zion. When God restores his people, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad. And this is like him speaking into his future kingdom. Because a fool is king. A fool is leading the people. And he's foolish because he rebels against the Lord. And David is saying, oh, that Zion would experience, that salvation from Israel will come out of Zion. And David is going to establish Zion. And David is going to be king in Zion. And he, of course, is the opposite of a fool. He is wise because he's fully submitted to God. That's where his wisdom and strength come from, is his submission to the Lord. This is why he's victorious. And this is so important that we get that as we're looking at, this topic of this particular day, judgment on fools. We see that this is why fools are judged, is because there is a rebellion against the ways of God. So now we're going to go to Psalm 31. Psalm 31, which I titled, Free Me from Shame and Terror. And this is David crying out to God, asking God to turn his ear to him, to rescue him, to be his rock and his fortress. And because of that, he says, since you are my rock and my fortress, lead me and guide me for your name's sake. Free me from the net they've hidden to catch me, because you are my strength. Into your hands I commit my spirit, which is so beautiful. And then he's not just saying, I want to die, I want to be with you. He's saying, guide me in everything that I do. I don't want to do things apart from you. I want to do things being led by you. I hate those who serve worthless idols, for as for me, I trust in Adonai. He's talking, of course, about the fools that worship things other than God. I'll rejoice and be glad in your grace, for you see my affliction. You know how distressed I am. You did not hand me over to the enemy. You set my feet where I can move about freely. And other versions say you set my feet in a spacious place. And so he asked God to show him favor, because he's scorned by his adversaries who are fighting against them. But he says, but God, I will trust in you. And he blesses God. He loves the Lord. And he tells people, be strong and fill your hearts with courage, all you who hope in Adonai. Which is so important, because he's making, again, a distinction between those who serve the Lord and are wise and those who rebel against God and are foolish. Now I want to go to Revelation chapter 8. We're going to read verses 6 through 13. Revelation chapter 8, verses 6 through 13. And this is what we see. Now the 7 angels with the 7 shofars prepared to sound them. Remember that. The first one sounded his shofar, and there was... the first one sounded his shofar, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was thrown down upon the earth. Now remember, God has just poured out the bowl of incense. Well, the angels just poured out the bowl of incense that has the fire from the altar in it, and it has the prayers of God's people. Now this is what it looks like. It looks like this, what this angel is saying, with the hail with fire mixed, mingled with blood, and it comes down upon the earth. And a third of the earth is burned up, a third of the trees and all the green grass is burned up. So something happens, like people talk about, holes in the ozone layer, and this happened and that happened. But something happens where this fiery presence comes forth, and it actually destroys vegetation, and it destroys grass, it destroys all types of plant life in the earth. The second angel sounded his shofar, what looked like an enormous blazing mountain. Excuse me. An enormous blazing mountain was hurled into the sea. And a third of the sea turned to blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So whatever hits the sea, it actually contaminates the sea water. So it addresses, so the fish are dying, the sea life is dying, the ships now, because of this, probably the tidal waves that came from this big mountain that hits the sea, it changes everything. So ships are being destroyed, like all types of stuff is happening from this enormous blazing mountain that is going to the sea. Now you would think, okay, well that sounds like maybe a meteor, something the size of a mountain that's on fire, hits the sea, but we're going to see a meteor in a minute. The third angel sounded his shofar, and a great star blazing like a torch fell from the sky. Okay, so that's clearly a meteor. So we got a meteor-like thing hitting the sea, and then we've got a falling star, a meteor, hitting the rivers and the springs, and it's called wormwood or bitterness, and so it actually pollutes the rivers and the streams. So we got the sea being polluted and contaminated. Now we got the rivers and the seas being polluted, rivers and streams being polluted and contaminated. So now we got sea life and even freshwater life. All this stuff is being affected, like fish and the fish industry and what we eat, and all of this stuff is being affected. So the plant life is affected, the seas are affected, the rivers and the streams are being affected. Look at verse 12. The fourth angel sounded his shofar, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, and a third of them were darkened, and the day had a third less light, and the night likewise, because the moon reflects the sunlight. Then the stars are also supposed to light up the night. Now we've got a third less light. So we got a third of the plants that are gone, a third of the vegetation, third of the trees. Now we've got a third of the light happening. And these numbers are important, because 3 is, of course, we see this triune God here. And so 3 is going to show us these trifold purposes of God. God is at work doing something, at least 3 things at once, as he's allowing all these things to strike the earth. See, this is literally preparing for the reign of Messiah, because there were corrupt things that had even affected the earth, the sea, all of it. And now it is actually being addressed, because of the judgment is being poured out. It actually affects the earth itself. Now, and the celestial bodies that affect what happens here on the earth. Verse 13. Then I looked and heard a lone eagle. Give a loud cry as it flew in mid-air. I remember I told y'all the eagle represents the sovereignty of God. Woe, woe, woe to the people living on earth because of the remaining blast from the three angels who have yet to sound their shofars. That's like, okay, there's more woe because this sounds terrible. This does not sound good at all. And this is so important because right now people are just going crazy. And oh, so much is happening. This sounds much worse than what we're experiencing right now. Because as we move into the seventh seal, this is stuff that hasn't happened yet, but we're very close to this time. And so we've seen, fish come up on the shores, and we're trying to figure out all these fish died in this part of the ocean or things like that. But this is in a mass scale, a scale that we have not ever seen before, a global scale. And because we are in a global society at this point, we will actually know that it's happening. As to where in biblical times, when they didn't have the technology that we had, if stuff like this were happening, everybody on earth wouldn't have known about it. We're in a time when things like this are happening throughout the earth. We will know because it's going to be broadcast and shared and tweeted and posted and all of that. We're going to know that these things are happening throughout the earth. And it's important because God's people are supposed to be paying attention to the scriptures so that we can make sure that we align ourselves with him and that we can explain to people that these are the things that must happen before the coming of the king. Because that's where we are. Month 10 is all about that. The things that must happen before the coming of the king. And this week 1 is about us being sustained in faith during the tribulation. And so we've got to allow our faith to sustain us because this season of time, when it comes to the whole span of human history, this is just a brief season of time. But we've got to be anchored in our faith so that we can continue to wash our robes in the blood of the Lamb during this time, and we can give God worship and praise no matter what's happening. And this is why I praise the Lord that he has linked this book of Revelation to what we're seeing happening with David, because in David's time, what he was experiencing was traumatic for him. He was going through hell. His whole life was turned upside down. But in the midst of it, he is worshiping God. And God is calling us to be like David in this time, that we would worship him in the midst of everything that's happening. So now, let's look at the next day. Death and the abyss are opened. Death, or the place of the dead, which is Sheol, and the abyss, which I'm talking to you guys about, are open. We're going to look at what that looks like. But we're going to start with the Psalms this time. And the reason we're going to start with the Psalms is so that you will really have this understanding of the will of Yahweh and be encouraged before we look at these scriptures, which have some really challenging text in them, because we have really moved into mature teaching. So now we're going to Psalm 140. We're going to start at Psalm 140. Here we go. And David begins with saying, rescue me, Adonai, from evil people. Protect me from violent people. They plan evil in their hearts. They continually stir up bitter strife. They made their tongues as sharp as a snake's. Viper's venom is under their lips. Keep me, Adonai, from the hands of the wicked. Protect me from violent people who are trying to trip me up. The arrogant hide snares for me. They spread nets by the side of the road, hoping to trap me. But he says to Adonai, you're my God. I plead to you for mercy. Then he continues on in verse 10 of the Complete Jewish and verse 9 of other versions. May the heads of those surround me be engulfed in the evil that they spoke of themselves. See, this is now he's praying for the judgment to come back upon them. Look at the next verse. May burning coals rain down on them. May they be flung into the fire, flung into deep pits, never to rise again. We were just reading about that fiery judgment actually coming from the heavenly realms. And this is what David is praying about, the judgment coming upon his adversaries. Let slanderers find no place in the land, that the violent and the evil be hunted relentlessly. Then he talks about how he knows that God himself is righteous and just, and that he himself will be with David and all of his upright people. Now I want to take you to Psalm 64. In Psalm 64, which I titled, Hide Me from the Plans of the Wicked, David speaks to God and he asks him to hear his voice as he pleads for him. He says, preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Because remember, David is still afraid that he's going to die at this point. Saul's tried to kill him so many times. And so now he's saying, hide me from the secret intrigues of the wicked and the open insurrection of evildoers. These are people who are conspiring against David, but they're rebelling against God. That's what he's talking about. And David's talking about how they aim their arrows, their poisoned words at him. that they're shooting at the innocent. And he's speaking of these evil people who are really just trying to look for more ways to commit crimes and to be evil. And we're going to see this as we keep going forward in Revelation as well, that people persist in evil, even in the midst of all this judgment, that evil persists. But then David reveals how this is going to end up. Verse 8 in the complete Jewish, verse 7 in other versions. Suddenly, God shoots them down with an arrow, leaving them with wounds. Their own tongues make them stumble. And this is so important because he's saying it brings people to be awestruck at God, acknowledging that this is God's work. They know that he has done it. The righteous will rejoice and take refuge in him, but of course God destroys the wicked. And this is the very thing we see happening in Revelation at this time. That he is bringing his people to rejoice, but the wicked, not so much, because they're being destroyed in their persistence to rebel. Now we're going to go to 1 Samuel, and we're going to read chapters 27 and 28. So in chapter 27, David decides to go back to the Philistine territory. Remember, he had done that before. They recognized him and pretend like he was crazy. Now he's going back, and he's got men with him. He's got a small little army. And so he goes to the Philistine territory, and he actually kind of hires himself out to King Achish, and he says, listen, I will serve you, I will work for you, I'll fight for you, but I want to stay here among you because Saul is trying to kill me because he says I turned against him. And so Achish thinks, oh yeah, well, David has lost favor with Saul. He is a mighty warrior. Let him work for me. And so Achish does bring him in this time. He doesn't mention what happened before. Maybe he doesn't recognize him as the same guy, but he trusts David. He brings David into Philistine territory. So David and his men now become a part of the Philistine army. And the king gives David a town for him and his men and their families, because they're all traveling together in tents. So he gives them a town to actually build homes and settle in. And that's a town in Philistine territory called Ziklag. But now it becomes David's town. So then when David becomes king of Judah, it actually becomes a part of Judah, because it's David's town. So anyway, while David, when he's not fighting the wars of the Philistines, he would go out and raid the enemies of Israel. But when the Philistine king asks him what he's been doing, he tells him he's been raiding Israel. He hasn't been raiding Israel. He's been raiding the enemies of Israel. But he'll tell the Philistine king he's been raiding Israel because it makes the Philistine king think, oh, well, David's going to stay with me forever. But he's not. David is just trying to hide out from Saul. He's just trying not to die. Because remember the song we just read, David is still thinking, I'm going to die. This guy's still going to kill me. I don't trust anything he says. So then here we go to 1 Samuel chapter 28. And the Philistines start to assemble for war against Israel. Now we got a problem. Because David's been saying that he's been attacking Israel. But he hasn't been. He's been attacking Israel's enemies. And he wiped them out completely so nobody can come back and tell Achish what he did. So now the Philistines are about to fight against Israel, and the Philistine king says to David, oh, you got to come with me to fight against Israel. And he thinks nothing of it because David's been telling him he's already been attacking Israel, which he hasn't been. And so David says, of course, I will join you in battle. And so he says, great, you're going to be my bodyguard for life. And so he's really bringing David close to him because David, he's a courageous man of integrity. So any leader would actually find him valuable. So here we see, of course, we know that Samuel is dead. And the Philistines are now coming against Israel, which means they're coming against Saul, because Saul is still king. Saul is freaking out because Samuel has died. The Philistine army has rallied against him, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have David to play the lyre for him. He doesn't have David to go out with his armies or to be his personal bodyguard, because he tried to kill David, and David is now with the Philistines coming against him, which makes him even more afraid because he knows that God is with David. So now he tries to inquire of God. There's no priest to inquire of God because he killed the whole town of Nob. So no priest is talking to him. He has got to figure out a way to inquire of God about this upcoming battle when he has alienated himself from everybody through whom he could inquire of God, and Samuel has now died. So this joker decides that though he has made mediums and spiritists illegal in Israel, so that nobody can operate as a medium or spiritist in Israel, he finds a medium in Israel who's not operating, using that particular gifting or sensitivity. She is not doing it because he said that it was illegal according to Torah. God said that it is not to be done. The mediums and spiritists are to be stoned and killed and taken out of the territory. So when he made it a law and said nobody's to be medium or spiritist, she obeys the law and stops doing that. She stops calling up the dead. He goes to see her in disguise, pretending not to be himself. And he says, I want you to call up somebody for me. So he tells her the name to call up the prophet Samuel, and she does. Samuel shows up. The prophet Samuel shows up. Now, when she sees this, she goes, wait a minute, stop. Who would want the prophet Samuel to come up? You are King Saul. Were you trying to trick me so you could kill me? You told me not to do this. You told me this is illegal. Now you're here asking me to do the very thing you told me not to do. Here is the prophet of God. Like, clearly I'm about to die right now. And he goes, no, you won't die. Tell me what he said. And Samuel speaks to him from Sheol, the place of the dead. See, this is where Samuel is. We've been talking about this a lot, you guys, because you got to get this. Because Yeshua has not yet come, died, and been resurrected, even righteous people are in the place of the dead. They're resting in the place of the dead. Even righteous people. We know Samuel was righteous. He's not in heaven. He's not with the Father, like the multitudes we see wearing white in Revelation. He's not there. He can't be there, because the first person to go there has to be Yeshua. So everybody righteous, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, everybody, they're all in the place that Yeshua identifies is Abraham's bosom, meaning that Abraham is in the place of the dead, and everybody righteous is rallying to where Abraham is, in a place of rest, in a place of peace, but they're sleeping in the place of the dead. They're not in heaven with the Lord. They're not at his altar. They're not worshiping the Father, because they can't go there. They can't go till Yeshua goes. And this is why we read the scripture in Matthew that showed us that after Yeshua was resurrected, others were resurrected, walked around in Jerusalem, and then they went up into the throne of Yahweh. And it's important that you get this, because what's happening is Sheol, the place of the dead, is being opened up. This medium is tapping into it, and God is allowing it. Even though it's against Torah, Saul has outlawed it. God is allowing it because he's giving one final message to Saul. He's like, you have even broken my law and your own law to inquire of me. And the reason you had to do it is because you alienated everybody righteous in your kingdom. Nobody righteous is going to inquire of me for you, because you killed the town of priests, you chasing down David. Nobody is going to seek me on your behalf. Nobody. So you got to actually break my law to try to come and talk to me, because I'm not talking to you. I have decided I'm not talking to you anymore. You got to break my laws to inquire of me. And guess what I have to tell you? I'm going to speak through the prophet to you this one last time. And when Samuel comes up and she sees him, Samuel says, why have you disturbed me and brought me up? Because he's in the place of the dead. And Saul says, I'm very upset because the Philistines are making war against me. God has left me and doesn't answer me anymore, neither by prophets or dreams. When I told you, it's not happening. God is cut him off, and so have all the righteous people who could inquire of God on his behalf. He's cut off. This is why I've called you, so that you can let me know what to do. And this is what Samuel says to him. Why ask me if Adonai has left you and become your enemy? He's like, why are you talking? If God is not talking to you, why are you talking to me? If God isn't talking to you, I don't got nothing for you. This is what Samuel's saying to him. Adonai has done for himself what he foretold through me. Adonai has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to your fellow countryman David, because you didn't obey what Adonai said and execute his fierce judgment against Amalek. And we talked about that. He didn't kill everybody, the sheep and the cattle. He gave to his men, and he left the king alive. Okay, here we go. This is why Adonai is doing this to you today. Adonai is giving Israel as well as yourself over to the power of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Adonai will hand over Israel's army to the power of the Philistines. Now, it's so important because there's some doctrinal stuff we got to talk about right here, okay? So now, the fact that this is recorded in the Bible means it absolutely happened. The fact that the prophet, when the prophet is brought up from Sheol, the place of the dead, is prophesying, we understand this is actually Samuel. It's not a demon. It's not a apparition. This is Samuel. Samuel's been called up from the dead, which means this woman actually is a medium and actually does have the ability to talk to the dead. That actually does happen. It's a real thing. It's a gift that is given. That is actually the way the Lord gives it righteously. It is a prophetic gift that allows us to commune with the Lord and to receive things that he would have us to receive from angels and things like that. It's not for the purpose of talking to the dead. It's not what the purpose is. When the Lord tells us in the Torah not to be mediums and not to interact with mediums, he says Why consult the dead about the living? He does not say you can't consult the dead, meaning it's not possible to do. He says don't do it. And the reason he says don't do it, there's lots of reasons he says it here. The same reason that Samuel says it. He's like, okay, listen, you're supposed to be inquiring of God, not of me. I'm sleeping, I'm resting. Why are you talking to me? If God is not talking to you, I can't help you. And that's the whole point. Our focus should be on God. People who are seeking messages from the dead and things like that, and the spiritists who want to reach into the spiritual realm for people and bring back answers. The challenge is it's all idolatry. It's seeking a wisdom of spiritual things apart from God. Because this is exactly what Saul is doing. He's trying to go around God to actually hear from God. We cannot do that. He needs to reconcile his relationship with God, but he's not doing it. He's actually breaking God's law to try to hear from God. He's like he's trying to use God, he's trying to get to God through the back door. And it doesn't work. Yeshua tells us those who go through the back door are thieves and robbers. Saul is a thief and a robber. He's not trying to have a righteous relationship with God. He's a hired hand. He's a wolf. He is not the shepherd that Israel needs. David is the shepherd that Israel needs. He's going to go through the gate, which is Yeshua. And that happens because he has a righteous relationship, a past and intimate relationship with God that is manifested through his worship. So he actually approaches God the right way, and God sends him the answers that he needs. David doesn't have to go to talk to spirits or dead people. He talks directly to God. And even if he can't get the prayer through or get the word back, the response he needs, he's got godly men around him who can inquire of God for him, and they give him the responses. Why? Because God has blessed him with grace and favor that he's still going to get the message from God that he needs to get. And that's where we need to get all that information from, is from God. God will use godly men and women in our lives to speak to us. He will speak to us directly via the Holy Spirit. He will speak prophetically to us. Like God himself wants to speak to us. He does not want us to use spiritual gifts he's given us to try to talk to other spirits, whether they're dead spirits or whether they are demons. Because spiritists say they're communing with all types of spirits. Those spirits are demons. Because if you're not talking to God, or he's not sending you messages through one of his angels, you're talking to a dead person or a demon. And God said, don't do that. And there's a reason we're not supposed to do that. Talking to dead people again makes them an idol, and they're in the place of the dead. If God doesn't give them information for you, they don't have nothing for you. This is what Samuel is saying. I have nothing for you. Because God is not talking to you. I have nothing for you. You see what I mean? This is Samuel telling us that I have nothing for you. You need to leave them at rest. Let God talk to you, because he knows the future. He knows your purpose. He knows what he's doing in your life. He knows the present on the other side of the world. God is the one who can give you the guidance that you need. So there are some who are charlatans who actually aren't mediums, but there are others who have a true prophetic gift that they have not surrendered to God. And now that gift is perverted, and they're talking to dead people, and they're talking to demons. And again, talking to dead people, that's idolatry. And it's not going to give you what you need. And it also isn't going to heal you. A lot of people feel they don't have closure, things like that. So that's what I'm going to call up dead relatives. God is the one who gives you closure. I'm telling you, because I have lost people in my life. Even recently, y'all know that. God gives the closure. Not trying to talk to a dead person. You need to be talking to God. That's who you want to talk to. He'll give you the closure. He'll heal your soul. He will minister to you. People at rest need to be left at rest. Don't open up the place of the dead so you can get something you think you need in the land of the living. It's not God's will for you. Additionally, connecting with the demonic is always going to bring sabotage into your life. This is very important that you get this. The spiritist and this and that and all the other things people try to do to tap into the spiritual realm, to go in the back door around God, apart from God, it opens up your life to Satan. And I'm telling you, he is manipulative. He is a conniver. He does nothing without his own motives happening on the other side of it. If any type of spirit is speaking to you, the enemy got some type of plan behind that thing. There's something he's trying to guide you into for his purposes. And he will invest. He will invest. He will allow spirits to speak to people for a long time, for months, sometimes even years, so that he can get them in a certain position. He wants to get them in, and then he can have the human doing his bidding. And this is key that we get that, because as people, we've been given the dominion on the earth. Spirits don't have dominion on the earth. We have dominion on the earth. In order for the enemy to do anything in the earth, he is a human host. And that's always in the back of his mind. Okay, so let me find out what these humans want. Let me see what I can do that might get them to trust me and listen to me and believe that I know what I'm talking about. and then I can manipulate them and use them for my purposes in the earth. See, that's what it's all about. The enemy usurping the authority God has given us. Don't fall for it. Don't do it. The enemy has played all types of horrible tricks on people who have tapped into the spiritual realm through things that they didn't realize were witchcraft. It is a terrible trick, and it sears your soul for destruction, because whatever spirit you commune with while you're in this life is the spirit you're going to be with in the next. If you haven't been communing with God, but you've been communing with other spirits, when he sends those spirits into the lake of fire, you go in with them because you're in covenant with them. You build a relationship with them. So whatever punishment is stored up for them is going to be the same punishment that's stored up for you. This is why it's very important that we listen to what God is saying. And just because something isn't, just because it actually produces some results, just because people do get some type of answer from the other side, and they hear this and they hear that, and it may have some accuracy or some truth in it, don't break the commandments of Yahweh, because he's trying to protect you from the wiles of the enemy. Not to mention, when you look even with the mediums and dealing with the dead, there are times when people who do that, sometimes they're reaching people who are in Sheol, the place of the dead, and sometimes they're reaching demons who are pretending to be the dead. See, the point is, never, ever, ever have spiritual encounters apart from God. That's the point. Because any spiritual encounter that is apart from God is setting you up for destruction. I guarantee you the enemy is going to find a way to weasel himself into it if he's not already in it from the forefront, and he's going to use it to usurp your authority, seal your judgment so that you have the same judgment as him, and pull you away from God. It's not worth it. Don't be so desperate that you allow the enemy to find a foothold into your life and into your family because you're trying to find out information apart from God. Don't do it. God tells us what we need to know when we need to know it. Sometimes there's certain things we don't need to know yet because we're not ready to even know those things. Submission to God and trusting God will allow us to release our questions to him and wait patiently for him to give us the answers when and if we can comprehend them and receive them and understand them. He himself will do it. There have been times I asked God questions and it took even a decade for him to answer the question. But when he answered it, I could receive it and I could understand it because he had to mature me and grow me up so that I could receive the answer. It's very important that we get there and that we allow God to train our gifts so that our gifts can be submitted to the Lord. Any spirit shows up and it's not the Holy Spirit, you send them to the feet of Yeshua. Don't talk to them. Don't answer no questions. Don't interact with them. Cast them out and you send them to the feet of Yeshua. If you know it's a demon, you bind them up and send them in the dry arid places. Don't interact in the spiritual realm apart from God. Only interact with the Lord and his Holy Spirit, because anything else is going to put you in a bad position. And so this is what we see Saul hearing. You about to be with me tomorrow and your sons. So Samuel prophesies to him for this last time. It's already written. We already know y'all coming. All of us here in the place of dead, we know that y'all are coming. You're going to be here. And not necessarily that Saul is going to be the same part of Sheol that Samuel's in. He may not be in a place of rest and peace that Samuel's in. He may not. Because he can kill a whole town full of priests and he's chasing down God's anointed. He's probably not in the same place that Samuel is in. But Samuel knows he's going to be dead. And that's the point. You're going to be dead, bro. You and your sons. Everybody. He's taking y'all out tomorrow. That's the end. And so then, of course, Saul's freaking out. But the woman tells him, eat some food, relax. And he does. He eats some food and he relaxes. But then the next day, of course, we know what happens. He goes into the war and dies. So that's what we're about to see, because the very thing Samuel said is going to happen. Now, let's look at what chapter we just read? We read 27 and 28. Right. Okay. Now we got to go to Revelation chapter 9. Revelation chapter 9, where we're still looking at the topic, death and the abyss are opened. Okay. Revelation chapter 9, we're going to read verses 1 through 12. Okay. So now, after these three woes, we see that there's three more shofar sounds that happen, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh. So the fifth angel sounded his shofar, and I saw a star that had fallen out of heaven onto earth, and it was given the key to the shaft leading down to the abyss. Now, this star is an angel, okay? And oftentimes those words are used interchangeably. People say star, and they're talking about angels, okay? This star is an angel, and the angel is given the key to the abyss, and it opens the abyss, and smoke comes up from the abyss, and the sun is darkened, and the sky is darkened by the smoke from the shaft of the abyss. Locusts come out of the abyss, okay? And these locusts are given the power like scorpions on the earth, and they're instructed not to harm the grass on the earth or any green plant or tree, because remember, like 2/3 of this vegetation is left, but only the people who didn't have the seal of God on the foreheads. So they're getting stricken by these locusts that sting like scorpions. And they aren't allowed to kill them, but they inflict pain. For 5 months, people are going through pain as these locusts that are like scorpions are stinging them and striking them with this pain, because God is trying to call them to a place of repentance. They're not sealed by the seal of God. They're not his people. So he's trying to draw them to repent. Okay. In those days, people will seek death, but they will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them, which is so interesting because the truth is God controls death. God controls death. There is a spirit of death that comes from the enemy, but it cannot actually kill apart from God. Remember when Satan went before the Lord, and the Lord said that he could put his hand on Job, but he couldn't kill him. See, the Lord controls life and death, and it can't happen unless the Lord himself has decreed it. So here he's saying they're going through pain, but they're not going to die. So God has closed up death, so they can't die. All they can do is experience pain for 5 months. But what he's opened up is the abyss. Now, remember I told y'all what the abyss is? But I want to make sure we go through it again. I told you we would talk about it more extensively when we get to Revelation, because you're going to see the abyss a few times. There are 3 different places. Well, actually 4, if you like the 5. There is the place of the dead, which of course we know Samuel is in the scripture we just read in 1 Samuel chapter 28. There is hell, which is likened unto the center of the earth, where the enemy and demons are. It's a place, so I've seen into hell. And members of my family have actually been there, and the Lord brought them back out just so they would have this revelation of hell. It is a place where the enemy rallies demons together. He gives instructions to demons. He trains demons. They make plans. He punishes demons who don't fulfill their assignments that he gives them. And then they're sent back into the earth. So it's likened unto the center of the earth with the molten lava and stuff like that. And this is a real place, a real spiritual place where demons and Satan are right now. That's it. Place of the dead is a different place. Then we've got the lake of fire, which you're going to see in Revelation chapter 21 or Revelation chapter 20, which is a place God himself has created so that he can send demons for eternal punishment. Once they go in the lake of fire, they never come out. A demon goes to the lake of fire, that is eternal destruction. You're just being destroyed over and over and over forever and ever. You never come out of the lake of fire. But then there is the abyss. The abyss is likened into a black hole. And a black hole is going to be a star. You know what a black hole is? It's a star that has burned out, meaning it's no longer producing light and heat, which is what a star is supposed to do. It is not fulfilling its purpose now. It is turned inward. It starts to implode because it has a gravitational pull, and anything that gets near it is pulled into it, sucked into it, and just kind of crushes in on itself. That's what a black hole is. It's a star that's turned inward, that's not producing the light and heat that it's supposed to produce. And that's an important spiritual metaphor for us, because when we're not doing the things that God has designed us to do, we're not operating in our gifts. Like, for example, I'm just talking about the medium and the prophet, right? It's the same gift. When a person has been given the prophetic gift and they submit it to God, you're like a star. You give off light, you give off heat, warmth. You bring things to life. You illuminate things. You shine like a star in this dark, depraved generation. When you use your gift the way God wants you to. And I'm speaking of the prophetic gift now, but that's any gift. When you use your gifts the way God designed them to be used, you're like a star. You're blessing people. You're shining light on things. You're giving revelation. Like, that's what's supposed to happen when we submit our gifts to God. But if you got the exact same gift, because God gives the gifts without repentance, meaning you don't have to be a righteous person to be gifted. God will give gifts to everybody. You got the same gift, but you decide you're not going to use it for God. You rebel against God. You still got a gravitational pull, but you're not producing light and you're not producing warmth. You're not helping anybody. Literally, you are sucking people in and trapping them in a trap of death and chaos. And this is what we see happening with mediums. Same gift as a prophet, but they haven't submitted that gift to God. Mediums, spiritists, all types of people, palm readers, all of them. It's a prophetic gift. They're not using the gift when God told them to. They're listening to demons. In fact, demons are training them. That's who's training them in their gift. So their gift is literally submitted to demons, is being trained by demons, and they become a black hole where they suck people in through robbery and chicanery and just trying to touch at the vulnerability in their soul, and they suck them in and they get their money and all of that, and they really are choking the life out of them. It's the same gift though. It's the same gift. It's the other side of that gift. Because the gifts are without repentance. And it's very important that we surrender our gifts to God, because it doesn't matter what gift you have. You can have a gift of the power to create wealth. You are a money maker. When you submit that to God, you're going to bless people. You're going to give off light, warmth, and heat and advance God's kingdom. When you don't submit it to God, you're going to be greedy. You're going to be oppressive. You're going to rob people of money. You're going to be manipulative. Like it will destroy you, and it will destroy everybody around you. And that's any gift, no matter what the gift is. And the point that I'm making here is that when we see the abyss, that this is a picture of what it looks like when something that is supposed to be used by God, which is an angel, decides that they want to rebel against God, those unclean spirits, those demons. So they went from being stars to now being black holes. The abyss, which is actually like a big black hole in the spiritual realm, is where those demons go. God sends them into those demons for like a holding pattern. And they stay there because it's jail for demons. You're going to see that in Revelation chapter 20. Where Satan gets thrown into the abyss. It is jail for demons, a big old black hole where they go into chaos and nothingness and blackness, and there's nothing crushing in on themselves the whole time. It's different from hell, because hell, they can actually make plans and train each other and stuff like that. In the abyss, you're not doing anything, but just in chaos and utter darkness and being crushed in on yourself. Like it is hopeless. No demon wants to go to the abyss. This is why when Yeshua came upon the legion, the man with the legion of demons, he was like, have you come to judge us before the time? They're like, no, we're supposed to be on the earth. The Lord said we can be on the earth right now. Don't send us back to the abyss. And this is the reality of the abyss. All demons will be in the abyss, and none would be in hell or roaming the earth except for human sin. Human sin empowers demons. And when human sin reaches a certain height, it actually releases demons out of the abyss. Demons who do that sin, demons who are proficient at that sin. It's like we call them forth because God still respects our will. At the end of the day, he still respects our will. Sometimes I wish he wouldn't, because our will is often evil. But he respects our will enough that when we come to a place where we are so engrossed in sin, we literally call forth out of the abyss this jail for demons, the demon who can teach us how to be more efficient at that sin. And this is what we see happening in Revelation chapter 9. These locusts that are coming forth are like a plague on the earth. But sin, the sin of humans, the unrepentant sin of humans, has now called this plague forth onto the earth. And this is why when we look at the ages, we look at all the ages that we're in, and we see these different sins, venereal diseases and AIDS and other stuff, and we see that it didn't exist before, and all of a sudden this new disease exists. It's because sin went to another level. Some type of sin went to another level. And when it went to the next level, it called forth the plague that comes from the demonic realm, because now a demon has also come forth because he brought the plague with him to make us proficient at the sin, but the judgment, the plague that comes with him, has also been released in the earth. It's important that we understand that, because we don't understand how important our choices are, how they affect the earth, each other, future generations, the spiritual realm. When we sin, we lend support to demons, we lend power to demons. When we obey God, we lend support to angels. We actually help angels win victory. Everything is centered around us. God really made us the center of his creation. Like, we are that important to him. And he honored us enough to give us free will. And he allowed our free will to literally affect the whole universe. And most of us don't get that we are that powerful. We like to think that we're powerful in a creative way, but we don't understand that we are also powerful in a destructive way. If you can create, you can also destroy. We don't want to accept the responsibility for the power of our destructiveness. We only want to think that we're powerful enough to create, when we're actually powerful for both. We have this unlimited potential to create, because we design in the image of the Creator. But when we sin, we start to take on the character of Satan, who is the destroyer. Our sin destroys. And we don't even have to actually destroy. All we have to do is sin, and we release destruction. And that is so important that we get that, because Yeshua died to kind of repeal that, to pull all that back in. And if all of us would just believe in him and confess our sins and allow him to teach us to repent, the earth would heal. The earth would heal. This is why the Lord says, if my people who call by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways. That's repent. Let's repent. When we turn from our wicked ways, he said he will hear from heaven, forgive our sins, and heal our land. See, literally, he is showing us the order that he has set up, these universal laws that he set up for everything in creation that really has to do with all of us. It has to do with humans. If we get that, we will be much more likely to repent. We will be much more likely to make good choices because we realize it is not just about us. It is about so much more than us. We would be creative as opposed to destructive. We would be obedient as opposed to rebellious. And not that we wouldn't mess up, but when we messed up, we would repent because we realize, man, I probably messed up more than I know. You see what I mean? But we don't want to take that responsibility on. We want to think that we're infinitely powerful in creating things in the earth, but we do not want to accept that we're infinitely powerful in destroying things in the universe because we are. Both are true. And so here we see the sin of humanity has now unleashed these locust like creatures that have the power of like scorpions, because now something else, some type of demonic forces come out of the abyss and they come with it. And it's so crazy because the Lord in this scripture opens the abyss, but he closes up death. He's like, y'all gonna wish you could die. I'm gonna close up death and I'm opening the abyss. But then we see, of course, in 1 Samuel chapter 28, he allowed death to be opened up, even though it was against his own law. It's like he allowed Saul to sin to that extent. He's like, you know what? This is the last thing you even gonna choose to do. And watch how far you take this thing. I'm gonna let you do it, and then I'm gonna speak to you even through your own sin. In the place of your sin, I'm gonna speak to you. And that's exactly what we see happening. And this is what he's trying to do with people in the earth. Even in the place of sin, he's trying to speak, but will we have ears to hear? So let's keep going. So now these locusts, they look like horses outfitted for battle. On their heads, what look like crowns of gold, and their faces, that means they have authority. And their faces were like human faces, that means they are creative. When you see the human face, that means they think, they're creative. Because some things are beastly, these are creative. The beastly ones are just, they act off of instinct and emotion. But the ones with human features, they are thinking, they're creative. Because that's what humans have been given, that's the gift we've been given. And it says, and their face like human faces, they had hair like women's hair, and their teeth are like teeth of lions. So they're devouring, and the women's hair is telling us that they're also seducing. They're like, manipulated. That's what's telling us what's going to be so like a Jezebel spirit, kind of, wooing with spells. Okay. Then it says their chests were like iron breastplates, so they're protected in some kind of way. So you're not going to take this thing out. Once it comes after you, it's probably going to get you. And the sound that wings made was like the roar of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. So they're like an army of locusts. Because we hear that a lot, the sound of rushing waters and thundering. It's like an army of them coming forth, okay? They had tails like tails of scorpions that sting. And of course, he already said that they were like scorpions. And their tails had the power to hurt people for 5 months. They had as a king over them the angel of the abyss. Remember I told you that a demon had come out. This is him. Whose name is Abaddon. In our language, it means destroyer. In Greek, it's Apollyon. In Hebrew, it's Abaddon. In English, it's destroyer. Now, this is not Satan, but he's going to be a high-level demon. Because Satan is called the destroyer. This joker is called the destroyer. He's specifically in charge of just destruction. That's where Satan is in charge of all the demonic stuff that happens. This one, under Satan, is about destruction. And he has been in the abyss, locked up, not able to come forward. But now it's like, okay, so now I get to come out, and I'm the toughest one that was in there. Now I get to come out. Oh, I'm about to tear myself up. And that's what he was doing. He's coming to destroy, because that means that our sin of destruction has gone to a height. For him to come out, we called him out. And that means that we've been destroying each other and things in the earth and God's will and God's purposes. And our destruction is going to such a height that this guy now gets released. Okay. And then it says, the first woe has passed, but there are still 2 other woes. So that was that 5th shofar that sounded. Now, day 7. This is the final day of this week 1. I know it's so much information here, which is why I have to kind of take my time and spend time with you on it, because as you read these scriptures yourself, I want to really make sure you got a good biblical background, a good doctrinal background. So when you read it, it makes sense to you. And so here's the 7th day. The righteous are delivered, but the wicked fail to repent. And it's so sad. So we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 29 and 30. So we're going to both of those chapters. Now, remember, Achish, the Philistine king, had told David, you're going to fight with me against Israel. We're mustering up the troops, bring your men. David says, I'll do it. This is great. You're going to be bodyguard for life. Now we're going back to David and this king of the Philistines. Once David shows up with his men to the Philistine army, the captains started talking to Achish and go, look, David is from Israel. And I know you trust him, but we don't trust him, because when we're fighting the Israelites, he might decide in the middle of the battle to turn on us and fight us against the Israelites. Now, probably that was what David was planning. We don't know what David was planning, but it's possible that he was. Because he had not been raiding Israel, but had been telling the Philistine king that he had been, he's lying to the Philistine king, it makes us believe, of course, that his allegiance is still with Israel. And then it's very possible that what the Philistine king is saying, or leaders are saying, is exactly what he's going to do. He was going to wind up siding with Israel and then turning it against the Philistine kings. We don't know, but probably that's what was going to happen. So they have figured this out, and they're like, look, we don't trust it. You should send him home. And the Philistine king really likes David. He wants to take David in the battle, but he's like, my chiefs, they don't trust you. So I got to send you back home. And David goes back home. He doesn't go into the battle. When he goes back home, he realizes that this town that the Philistine king had given him, Ziklag, has now been raided by the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites were one of the people that he was raiding. Remember, he was raiding some people, but not Israel. But he told the Philistine king that he was raiding Israel. Well, the Amalekites were one of the groups that he was raiding. Now they have found his home, and they're raiding him. And don't feel bad for the Amalekites, because they are historical raiders. Remember, this is why God said that Saul was going to take all of them out. Saul didn't do it. So David was finishing that job, and he was raiding the Amalekites. But the Amalekites have now returned back on David and raid Ziklag. Why? Because they always come up against the vulnerable, the weak, the sick, the old, the infirm, the children. They come against those that are vulnerable and unprotected. And so when Israel was coming up out of Egypt, we read this in Deuteronomy, they cut off everybody that was lagging behind. This is what they do. They prey on the weak. They're warriors, like not righteous warriors. They're like brutes, and they prey on the innocent, which is just a terrible people to be. Which is why God said he was supposed to destroy them, but Saul didn't. So now these Amalekites, who were not the ones that David raided, because the Amalekites were not like a kingdom that lived all together. So if you want to kill the Amalekites, it's not like you went to one spot and you kill everybody in that one town. They had these raiding bands that lived all over. And so David was raiding certain groups of Amalekites and killing them. But there were still other groups of Amalekites that were alive, and doing stuff. So though he had destroyed this band over here, another band came from another place and came and raided Ziklag, took his wife, his kids, all of his men's wives and kids, burned the city down and took all their stuff and escaped. So when he gets back home, after he had told this Philistine king he would fight against Israel, he realizes that his whole family has been kidnapped. The town has been burned down, and really he and his men are in a terrible place of despair. Now, having had this conversation with the Lord about this many times, it was not the will of Yahweh for David to be in that battle with the Philistines and Israel. And David was not supposed to be there. He was out of position. He was supposed to be with his family. And had he been with his family, and had his men been in Ziklag and not with the Philistines, pretending that they were about to fight Israel, then when the Amalekites showed up, he would have been there to defend his family. He was out of position, headed into war against the people he was about to lead, and that's not where he was supposed to be. Whether he was pretending or not, that was not God's will for him. And he didn't inquire about that. I mean, he inquired on a lot of stuff. He didn't inquire about that. Lord, am I supposed to go with these Philistines against Israel? He did not ask God about that. And he gets out of position. And when he does, the enemy attacks terribly. However, nobody's dead. They've just been taken into slavery. And he starts to cry out to God. Like it's terrible, because everybody is gone. He is freaking out. His men are freaking out, and they're thinking about stoning him to death. It says in verse 6, because he was the leader, and now their wives, their children, everything they own is gone. They are blaming him. But it says in that same verse 6, but David strengthened himself in the Lord, and he calls to the priest, and he has the priest to inquire of Adonai, which is what he should have done before. He asked the priest to inquire of the Lord, and he says, should I go in pursuit of these Philistines? In pursuit of these Amalekites. And the Lord tells him, yes, go. I will turn him over to you. Which is so important, because as he goes forward and he starts to pursue them, he realizes that some of the men are exhausted because they're mourning and they've been crying out to God. So they stay behind and they watch the equipment and stuff. Then the rest of them go with David and they find one of the servants, an Egyptian, who had been taken into slavery by these Amalekites, but he had become one of their servants. And they left him behind because he got sick. Again, these are the Amalekites. They don't care about the weak, the vulnerable. So this guy's been a servant. He's been with them this whole time. They leave him because he's sick. They pretty much left him to die. When they find this boy, David then can inquire of him where were they headed. And he knows. And so he's able to track the Amalekites from this Egyptian slave that they left. And he finds them. They come upon him. They attack him at dawn all the way till evening. The next day, none of them escape. They kill everybody. They take all of their people back. They take all of their stuff back and the Amalekite stuff. And it's such a beautiful day that then when they come back, David shares all of the treasures that they receive from this raid. He shares it with the men who stayed with the equipment. He shares it with them equally. When you see him being a good king already, he's not even king yet, but he's being a good king, because he shares this with them equally. Then he also sends some to the leaders in Judah. We see that in verse 26. He starts to bless them and give them gifts. And this is a beautiful thing because, again, he is not king yet. And he doesn't know Saul is about to die. He might have suspected, though, because the whole Philistine army is coming against him. He might be suspecting that Saul might be about to die, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know if God's going to give Saul more time or if Saul's about to die. But he is really acting like a king. He's really stepping into his purpose and the destiny God has for him, the call on his life. And so he sends these gifts to all these towns in Judah, and he starts to really bless God's people so that as God is blessing him, he's been a blessing to others, which is the very thing that we're supposed to do. And this is happening right after the worst time in his life. Like, can you imagine leaving your home and you come back, your home has been burned down, all your stuff has been taken, and your family's been kidnapped? Like, that is somebody's worst nightmare. Kidnapped by brutes. Like, these guys are horrible. That's somebody's worst nightmare. And that's what he came back to. But once he strengthened himself in the Lord, he worships God. Then he goes and he tracks down these Amalekites. God restores everything. And then he really rises to the occasion, being a good leader over all of his men, treating them all equally, and then also blessing the Judean towns, where he's going to soon be crowned king. So now let's go to Psalms 70 and 58. I'm going to start with Psalm 70. Listen to more Psalms of David as we get kind of an understanding of David's heart. And this one I have titled, Adonai, Hurry and Rescue Me. And of course, we know that he was, crying out to Yahweh at the time when his family was taken into captivity by these Amalekites. And he says, God, rescue me. Adonai, hurry and help me. May those who seek my life be disgraced and humiliated. May those who take pleasure in doing me harm be turned back and put into confusion. May those who jeer, aha, aha, withdraw because of their shame. But, and I love this verse, but may all those who seek you be glad and take joy in you. May those who love your salvation say always, God is great and glorious. But I am poor and needy. God, hurry for me. You are my helper and rescuer. Adonai, don't delay. Then also I want to read Psalm 58 in your hearing. And David speaks to when he's speaking in this psalm, he's speaking about these rulers who are unjust and not fair. And it's so important because Saul has still been chasing him. So speaking about Saul, but then also about these Amalekite rulers, because this is how they've set up their lifestyle. Their livelihood is based on destroying other people's lives. Like, this is how the Amalekites live. And to be in a part of a group like that is just pure wickedness. Pure wickedness, which is why God said he wanted them all destroyed. And so he says, do rulers indeed speak justice? Do you rulers indeed speak justly? Do you judge people with equity? No, in your heart you devise injustice. In your hands mete out violence in the earth. Even from birth, the wicked go astray. From the womb, they are wayward, spreading lies. And he talks about that their venom, is like the venom of serpents. Just the fact that when they connect with people, they're like serpents, and they can't even be charmed by a charm. I mean, they're not even listening to God. They have really become like Satan. And that's exactly what I was talking about the wicked people in the earth. And so, David asked God to break the teeth in their mouth, to shatter the fangs of these lions because they're devouring people. And remember, those locusts had teeth like lions. And so it's very interesting that David is using the same imagery here. May they vanish like water that drains away. May the arrows be blunted when they aim with their bows. And so he's talking about Lord to stop everything that they're doing, cast their schemes to the ground. In verse 11 in the complete Jewish, and verse 10 in other versions, it says, the righteous will rejoice to see vengeance done. They will wash their feet in the blood of the wicked. And that's a very, very vivid picture. But David understands the judgment of God. This is something I've been trying to explain to you guys. David gets that in order for God's ways to be done in the earth, the wicked have to come down. They have to be destroyed. They have to die. David gets it, but he's also a warrior. He's been in wars. He's been in battles. So he has a very clear sense of what this looks like when God says he's judging, he's taking over places. For those of us who operate in the spirit, it's not always the same, but we want the demons to come down. We want wicked and rebellious rulers to be removed from their place. And then we've got to understand that as God judges in the earth and prepares for the reign of Messiah, that does also mean death, that there will be people who will die. And we see that in Revelation where they're dying. Well, actually, they're in pain. They're not even dying. They're in pain for 5 months, not even able to die, as God is trying to give them opportunity to repent, but doing so in the midst of their judgment. But we're going to see that they're not going to repent. Revelation chapter 9, we're going to read verses 13 through 21. That's the rest of this chapter. And it says, the sixth angel sounded his shofar, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the gold altar before God, saying to the sixth angel, the one with the shofar, release the four angels that are bound at the great river Euphrates. Now, the fact that they're bound means that they're demons. God doesn't have to bind good, holy angels. He binds the ones that are unsubmitted to him. He binds them so then they will only be released when he wants to release them. So, because the holy angels do what he tells them to do. He don't got to bind them. He say, don't do this, do that. Hold this back, hold that back. Like the holy angels are listening to him. Angels that are not going to listen to him, he's got to bind them up and then release them when his purposes are ready to use them. You see what I'm saying? And so this is what we see happening with these four angels. They are angels. They're unclean angels. They're rebellious angels, which means they're demons. Okay? These four angels have been kept ready for this moment, for this day and month and year, to kill a third of mankind. Now, again, God controls death. So though they've been wanting to kill people probably for millennia, he doesn't allow it until this moment. Again, human sin is what causes him to release it. Okay? And remember, for 5 months, people were praying to die. God closed off death. Now he's releasing demons who want to kill. So now these people who have been praying to die, now they're about to die. But the problem is, if they're not repentant, it's not going to be good for them because it takes them into eternal torment. Okay. And it says, and the number of cavalry soldiers was 200 million. I heard the number. That means that's how many are going forth, along with these angels, going forth to just destroy. Okay. Here's how the horses looked in the vision. The riders had breastplates that were fire red, iris blue, and sulfur yellow. The horses' heads were like lions' heads, and from their mouths issued fire, smoke, and sulfur. See, that's the judgment of God. It was these three plagues, fire, smoke, and sulfur, that killed a third of mankind. The fire, the smoke, and the sulfur issuing from the horses' mouths. For the power of the horses was in their mouths, and also their tails, for their tails were like snakes with heads, and with them they could cause injury. This is what's killing the people. Okay? Remember I told you the four demons, they want to go forth and they want to kill everything. This is what's killing them. Is this what is on these horses, this cavalry that's riding with them? This is what's killing the people, the third of mankind. Remember we saw a third of the trees and the plants, a third of the seas, a third of the ships. Now we see a third of humankind dying. And that's a large number. Third of humankind, the 7 billion people on the earth, like my goodness, there's over 2 billion people gone. Okay. The rest of mankind, those who were not killed by these plagues, watch this, even then did not turn from what they had made with their own hands. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols made of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood, which cannot see, walk, or talk. Nor did they turn from their murdering, their involvement with the occult, and with drugs, their sexual immorality, or their stealing. And this is so important. So basically, death and destruction is coming upon the earth. People are still trying to call up dead people. They're still being mediums and going to mediums. They're still being spiritists and interacting with demons. They're still worshiping idols, whether they know they're idols or not, but it's not God. They're worshiping them. They are still killing each other because remember, human destruction is what has opened the door for this destruction to come forth. So they're still doing it, still murdering people, even though they see people dying all around. They're still being involved in witchcraft and the occult. They're still using drugs and other things like that because some people are trying to just forget what's going on and just drink and smoke themselves to death. They're still being involved in sexual immorality because some people use that also to anesthetize themselves so they don't think about what's going on. They use sex like a drug. And they're still stealing from each other. People are dying all around. They're still doing all this wickedness and not repenting before God, when God himself has released it to give people an opportunity to repent. And this is so important that we get that because as his people, our faith has to sustain us while all this is happening. Our faith has to keep us so that we know that God is not going to allow anything to touch us or to bring us to any places outside of his purpose for us. Any trial we go through, he's got a purpose in that. Anything we experience, God is going to use it for his glory. If we stay committed to him and connected to him, we stay rooted and grounded in our faith. We cannot turn from God. We can't turn to our flesh, to any other idols, into any demons. We've got to make sure we stay committed to God and we do what his word says, whether we understand it or not. Now, my job and my apostolic anointing is to help y'all to understand God's word. To help you understand why God says what he says. But the reality is, which is why we just finished the book of Job, even if you don't understand what God is doing, even if you don't understand what he has told you to do or why he said to do it anyway. Do it out of trust and obedience because it will go well with you, even when you don't understand. And that is a problem with even God's people. We feel like we deserve an answer, that we deserve to know what's going on. We deserve for God to tell us. We deserve for God to do this for us. That we don't deserve anything. We are his children. He tells us when he knows it's appropriate, when we can handle it, when it is useful. And he does trust us with things. We've certainly read that in Genesis where he tells Abraham, I'm about to destroy Sodom, which I talked about in God Speaks on Wednesday. Very important revelation. But he does not have to do that. When he does it, it's because he wants to and because he knows that it's something we can handle and because he's involving us. He's not a gossip. He's not going to tell us stuff for the sake of telling us. He's going to tell us because there's a purpose behind it. And this is what we've got to understand. God understands all the purposes, even when we do not. We've got to surrender ourselves to him. We've got to submit to him. We've got to trust him in the midst of all of this and believe that he has our best interest at heart. So I pray that bless you. I know that it challenged you because it was meant to. But as you reflect on this, you want to think about this week one reflection. What scripture did you read this week that anchored you in your faith so that you can endure tribulation as you await the coming of our King? God will give you scripture that will bless you and that will help you to be sustained in faith in the midst of tribulation. Allow him to do it in your life. Allow him to use you in other people's lives, and you will be blessed to be a blessing in the midst of everything happening around you. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. We do have temple service tomorrow at 3 p.m. online. If you receive our emails, you've already gotten the link, and I'm going to send it again today with the link for this video. But additionally, if you're a part of our Priesthood Academy, we do have training tomorrow at 1 p.m. You'll also receive the link for that. And if not, I'll send it again. I will send it again as well with the link for this video so that you can join us for training because God is doing great things in the earth and he needs us to meet him where he's working. And the only way we can do that is to be obedient and be in position when he's training us, when he's raising us up, when he's using us in accordance with his will. So I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Remember, tonight at sundown begins a new month. And so if you want God to use you in your priestly function to offer him the spiritual offering that he requires on Rosh Hashanah, the new month, then I want you to download the workbook at burntoffering.org so that you can give burnt offerings unto the Lord. Be blessed, and I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.